Let me start by welcoming you all distinguished colleagues and guests, delegates, experts, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Probert-Su and Mr. Quintarelli. Good afternoon and welcome to this conference. The topic is the role of advanced technologies in overcoming COVID-19 disruptions in international trade. We have convened here in this online format to discuss how advanced technologies can help us to overcome the trade disruptions caused by the global economy, by the global pandemic, and possibly also how these technologies can help us prevent further infection spikes. I'm glad to see that this meeting is really convening different experts from different fields. I think we have private sector, international organizations, civil society, academia, and we also have, quite importantly for UNECE, delegations from our member states. I trust that all of you will have fruitful discussions and you will really look into how these advanced technologies can help foster trade and how they can help overcome new barriers to trade. All of that we do within the overall objective of harnessing trade for the SDGs and for a sustainable post-COVID economic recovery. If we look at the COVID-19 pandemic, it really affected us in many, many different ways. And let me give you a few examples in this regard. Let us start by reminding us of the really worrying news that we read about the global economy. If we just look at the World Bank, the Global Economic Prospect issued recently, what it says there is that advanced economies are projected to shrink by 7%. That will also spill over to emerging markets, to developing economies. They are forecasted to contract also quite significantly. If we look at jobs, there is a recent ILO report, and that refers to some 15% decline in employment rates. And obviously, there is also investment. UNCTAD just issued its World Investment Report 2020. And UNCTAD there projects that global foreign direct investment, it's forecast to shrink by up to 40% in 2020. So that's a significant number. And if we look a little bit at the transition economies, that's the region where our UNECE, the 17 program countries are located. FDI flows to these transition economies. They are also very, very hardly hit by the economic downturn. There are projections that we will see a decline of around 38%. So again, a significant number. Obviously, also international trade has suffered. We have seen border close downs, we have seen various preventive measures, all of that broke the established supply chains. We have even seen shortages of goods that we never expected to happen. If we looked at our shelves, sanitizing products, protective equipment, they were absent. It went so far that at some point, pasta and toilet paper was not available anymore. So COVID-19 has changed our way of life. Things that we took as granted, they were taken away. Like our lifestyle was changed, the status quo was broken, the public spaces closed down, social distancing turned mainstream, working from home became mandatory. It's only recently that we are slowly coming back to the office. And we've all seen the different travel restrictions, and many of us were affected by that. In sum, we are forced to adjust and to rethink our way of life. I understand that your meeting today, you will discuss the opportunities that advanced technologies can bring us in this regard. And indeed, technological development in the last decades, it has been faster than ever. There is modernized infrastructure, there is breakthrough in scientific knowledge and technical applications. And with all of that, we might have a foundation, we might have the tools that assist us in fighting the COVID-19 infection curve. That's immediately very, very essential. And also in rebooting the global economy and in putting it on a sustainable track. So advanced technologies, indeed, they can have a great role to play here. In Geneva at the moment, there is as much talk about the Swiss COVID app. I don't know how many of you have downloaded it, but advanced technologies are clearly in many, many sectors. And again, let me look a little bit at international production, new industrial revolution. Here we have new tools that are shaping international production in many ways. Robotics-enabled automation, enhanced supply chain, digitalization, additive manufacturing, 3D printing. These are just 3 examples, but each of these technologies, they will have distinctive effects on the length, the geographical distribution, and the governance of global value chains and global supply chains. So what is clear, advanced technologies, they bring great opportunities, but they also bring challenges. And if we look at it from the perspective of international production, challenges include divestment, relocations, investment diversion. There are challenges in many areas of policymaking: privacy, job loss, industrial restructuring, competition, national security, and the like. And there are the very practical challenges to harvesting the benefits of new technologies. One needs to find the right tool, one needs to find the perfect usage, and one needs to really successfully implement them. So many economic operators, they are struggling with that, and they are operating in a climate of uncertainty. We know that with all these new technologies, things will change, but we do not know how, when, and where. All that means that we need to rethink the way we govern, we interact, and we set the rules of the game. So where does UNECE and where does UN CEFACT come in here? The standards that UNECE and UN CEFACT issue and the dialogue that we are opening, they help us understand, and I hope they help us effectively implement these new technologies that are available to us right now. I trust that today's meetings, the conversations and exchanges you will have today, that in so doing you will look at the contributions by UNECE and UN CEFACT, and that we also look at concrete outcomes, concrete action points. What can we do to reap these benefits in today's COVID-related challenges? I'm very, very pleased to have with us here today Ms. Sue Probert, the chair of UN CEFACT, and also Mr. Stefano Quintarelli, the chair of the Advisory Group on Advanced Technology. I thank you both for being here with us today and also to carrying out the work and the support you're granting to UNECE and UN CEFACT. So I think we are in great hands here and we have a unique opportunity. To close, COVID-19, it has really disrupted many, many lives and it has endangered the global economy. And if we look at what our UN Secretary General said, he stressed that recovery from the current crisis, this must lead to a different economy. It must lead to a sustainable economy that is more resilient to future shocks. The key word here very much is building back better. And I'm convinced that advanced technologies can help. They can help us achieve SDG number 8 on decent work and economic growth. They can help us achieve SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production, or SDG 17 on partnerships. And I'm confident that you, with your discussions today in this conference, that through all of that, you move us one step closer into this direction. So I'm very appreciative of your contribution to this joint endeavor. I thank you for your attention. I'm curious and excited to listen to your deliberations. And I pass the floor back to Maria. Maria, thank you to you and to the team for making this happen.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for these nice words and very inspiring points. And if I can now give the floor to our dear chair of UN CEFACT, Sue Probert. Sue, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction. And I would also like to welcome you all to this very important online conference today. Distinguished participants, experts, and colleagues. Wherever you are in the world, I wish you good morning, afternoon, or evening as appropriate. It's very encouraging to see the number of participants growing. It's up to 61 now and maybe even more. So you're all very, very welcome. So I hope everyone is safe in these unprecedented and challenging times. Apart from the very serious health and daily life impacts that we are very well aware of, this cruel pandemic has negatively impacted economies and employment, as we know. But on the positive side, it has also given a boost to the electronic exchange of information. I know that the Industrial Revolution was unfortunately very much, especially with regards to railways, was very, very much pushed forward by world wars. It's a terrible fact, but some of these things can actually help us to move forward in ways that will long-term be beneficial. Whilst economies are suffering and employment growing across the world, it has been estimated that the use of information technology has risen by nearly 20%. We've been propelled into increasing our use of webinars, such as today, and more importantly, the electronic exchange of information. CEFACT, as the United Nations Center for Trade Facilitation and E-Business, has been at the forefront of pioneering electronic data exchange for more than 20 years. That should be 30 years, I apologize. And the importance of this work has been highlighted at this time, as it can contribute greatly to the reduction of the exchange of paper documents and their associated face-to-face interactions. Just to give you some examples, some highlights, the electronic road consignment note, or known as the ECMR, which replaces the paper CMR document, which drivers need to present to authorities. Thereby, by using electronic ECMR, we can remove all unnecessary human intervention and contacts. Maritime transport messages, such as the Bay Plan or the UN EDIFACT BAPRI message, is the message sent by vessels when they arrive in a port. They may have tens of thousands of containers on board, and this one message can replace several thousands of sheets of paper that were previously needed to tell the port what was on board the ship. Supply chain messages, such as the ordering process and e-invoicing, removing the need for physical meetings and at the establishment and the conclusion of trade contracts. Agricultural messages, such as sanitary certificates, or the UN, also known as the UN CEFACT eCert, which has been in use since 2008, which again removed the obligation to physically present paper documents. And lastly, but not least, the tracing and tracking of physical assets and regulated goods throughout the international supply chain, from sellers to buyers, a very important area on which we have critically important projects right now. CEFACT has also developed multiple guidance documents and recommendations which can eliminate the need for paper document handling and minimize the need for face-to-face contacts during international trade transactions. Of course, face-to-face interactions are still very important, but obviously we need to consider them from the health point of view at the moment as well. The single window concepts in the recommendations 33 to 37 establish a framework to streamline the processes at the border, which include a single entry point of data as opposed to needing to physically go to multiple agencies for ink stamps and approvals. The data pipeline principle, which enables traders to exchange high quality data and to satisfy all operational and regulatory processes without ever physically meeting. The smart container application of Internet of Things, devices attached to maritime containers full of the goods that we need to help us with these types of crises. They can help to follow the contents, to enable information about anything that happens to the container, and it enables us to make sure that the supply chain can be conducted as efficiently as possible and with minimum human intervention. All of this reducing of the face-to-face contact is the most effective way of decreasing the spread of COVID virus in these environments. All of CEFACT's deliverables can contribute directly to this. It's important to remember that electronic exchange of data requires a clear semantic understanding of the information being exchanged. This is not only related to individual definitions of data, but also of their relationships to each other. A term such as sender can have multiple definitions depending on the context. Similarly, goods descriptions can be differently understood depending on whether it's defining something on an invoice or something on a customs declaration. All of these are semantically important, and we have directly contributed to clarifying this by developing and maintaining data libraries, reference data models, repositories, and code lists, all of which are available free of charge on our website and can support all of the wonderfully new advanced technologies that you'll be discussing. The AGAT was specifically created to enable us to explore new avenues of ways of improving electronic data exchange and limiting potential disruptions to trade. I really look forward to our discussions. The main focus of today will be the report that has been developed, and I look forward to a very fruitful exchange today. And thank you again for joining. Have a great discussion, and I now pass on to Stefano as your chair. Thank you very much. Maria.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Elizabeth, for your inspiring remarks. And thank you all for being here to this workshop. I think that both Elizabeth and Sue were very effective in explaining and reminding us how extraordinary are the times that we are living in, and what we should try to pursue in order to facilitate trade, international trade. The advanced group on the advisory group on advanced technology has been formed in order to help looking at how advanced technologies can help facilitating trade. And we had our first meeting in January 2020 in Geneva, and effectively we were disrupted by COVID. We were part of this disruption, and we needed to think and to innovate on how we work since of this pandemic. We decided to try to learn, to study what it was happening around the globe, and in order to nail down and focus on areas where advanced technologies can help. So in April, we sent a questionnaire to the UN CEFACT community, and we asked them for feedback about the impact on the international trade and innovative applications. We were asking for open-ended questions. So we asked what innovative approaches have members seen in relation to international trade, what was the impact on the logistics of import and export, how they think, all these experts, they think how advanced technologies can help overcome such disruptions, and what they would consider a useful role of UN CEFACT standards and recommendation looking ahead. So based on this questionnaire we sent during the month of June, we prepared the report. The title is Impact on COVID-19 Outbreak on International Trade and Logistics and the Ways Advanced Technologies Can Help Overcome Such Disruptions. This report is available on UN CEFACT website under the documentation tab of this event, and is going to be launched soon after this workshop. Then, based on the work that we've done so far, we decided to have this workshop because we found we listened to the community asking when asking for these feedbacks. The results that we obtained indicated that we should have 3 areas of focus. The first one being digital platforms. So how implement and use digital platforms to enhance supply chain. Much of this have been addressed by Sue. And how digital products, second pillar is digital products, how the development and implementation of digital products can, interoperable across borders, can facilitate the new needs that are arising due to the COVID-19. And the last pillar is interoperability. So the need of building cross-border interoperable ecosystems to enable the revitalization of economic processes, international economic processes. So this is the report that you can find in the documentation tab of the event, and the reason for for this workshop. I would, of course, we're looking at specific technologies. The major ones are the usage of blockchains, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. And we invited some very distinguished speakers to present their works in these three areas: interoperability, standards, and products and platforms. I must say that we are living in very in extraordinary times. Some things are happening that we could have not envisioned. Many countries are rolling out contact tracing applications. This is an example. And you probably are aware that these contact tracing applications are somehow pushing the boundary of what was commonly understood as democratically correct and privacy respectful. Now, if you think that in order for these contact tracing applications, we need to rely on application programming interfaces and APIs that have been published by Google and Apple that are reserved for states. So in each state, just one application can use these application programming interfaces, these APIs, and these applications must be state controlled. So effectively, for the first time in our history, we are now having operating systems functions that are available only to states. And we are considering that as being part of the new normal. This would have been inconceivable just a few months ago, having some state-reserved functions on the devices that are the home of our digital dimension, no? So it's the boundary of what we can perceive as possible is changing dramatically fast. I believe that it is still going to change fast. We are not through the pandemic. When hopefully a vaccine will arrive, it is going to have long times of deployment across the population. And we need to be prepared, or we need to think how we can deal with a situation where we have portions of the populations that is vaccine, that has had the vaccine, and portions of the population that have not. I believe that eventually we are going to have a discussion on digital passports, of immunity passports. Some scholars are now, epidemiologists are now saying that we're going to need some way of tagging people in order to know if they have undergone vaccination or not. And this is a discussion that will happen. It will happen in a couple of months when we're going to have the vaccine. And it will have an impact on international trade, on the possibility of people to move and to interact with other people and companies. So we're going to need the discussion on these issues as well. And this is pushing the boundary, as I said, between what was perceived as conceivable and what was considered not conceivable. And these things are changing dramatically, and technology has a tremendous role in this evolution. So I'm very interested in what our speakers are going to tell us in this afternoon. I remember that we are going to have 3 sessions, that each session will have interventions of about 15 minutes, and then we're going to leave 10 minutes for Q&As after each session. So I thank you again, Sue and Elizabeth, for their introduction. I thank you, Maria, for having helped in organizing this event, and particularly to Thomas, who has done a great job on helping us. Without any further ado, I hand over the floor to our first moderator of the first panel, Virginia Cram. I mean, she doesn't need a presentation really, but she worked for 25 years in the UN Economic Commission for Europe in Geneva. And in the last 11 years of her UN career, she was responsible for trade facilitation and electronic business standards, regulatory cooperation, national innovation frameworks, public-private partnerships. She's a cornerstone of our recent history. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Virginia, for moderating our first panel.
Thank you. I'd also like to, that was a wonderful introduction to me, but I'd also like to mention that at the moment, I'm the Trade Facilitation Procedures Domain Coordinator in CEFACT, having moved from the Secretariat to the expert side of the table. And I'm also the CEO of Triangularity, which supports the use of innovation and technology for economic development. Now, the title of this session is Standards and Interoperability. So I wanted to introduce this topic and make the connection with our speakers of today, which you may have noticed are all lawyers. Interoperability is a key element in creating systems to support international trade. Having a system that works only with one industry or only in one country is fine, provided that you're only trading domestically and only within your own sector. However, that's rather unusual because trade in general, at minimum, you usually need to talk to the banks. And you need to talk to other sectors. Who are you selling to? So you need to exchange information between systems and in international trade across borders. This requires interoperability, and standards are the building block of interoperability. But interoperability exists at different levels. One thing is, as in many cases in life, there's more than one aspect of interoperability. So let's say, Sue did a fantastic job of introducing the standards that UN CEFACT works on and how they're related to trade. But I'd like to just talk a little bit about how they're related to interoperability. So we have the data level of interoperability, which technically is probably the easiest because it just means defining the data the same way so that computers interpret it the same way. But computers are very literal. And so if you're going to have a dictionary, there's a common dictionary about what data terms mean and how they're related to one another, how putting them together in different combinations may change the meaning of those data elements. You have to define them at a very fine, granular level, much more specific than in any human dictionary where you may have more than one interpretation for the same term. So this is what the core components library does. And then the reference data models, which are sort of subsets of the core components library, put together the interpretations that you might want to use in one particular sector, for example, multimodal transport or purchasing. So that's one level of interoperability. Then you have the exchange level where you want to send information. The data level is after you receive the information from another system, being able to interpret it. But there's the actual sort of physical exchange of data. So how do you do that? How do you, between systems, let the other system know what you want and then be sure that it comes back to you in the right format. That's done using application programming interfaces usually. And CEFACT is also working on how to standardize application programming interfaces based on the core components library and the data that's defined there. And then we get, so that's another level of difficulty. And then we get to a still higher level of difficulty, which is the transaction level, which is being able to exchange instructions so that something happens on another network, which comes from you, whatever your network is. Or being able to move digital assets. In the case of blockchain, you have digital assets, and being able to move those digital assets across networks so that you move the digital asset from network A to network B, and then it doesn't exist anymore, or you can't use it anymore on network A, but you can use it on network B. In blockchain, where you can't erase things, they're permanent. Making this movement of digital assets across networks can be complicated, and in all networks it can be complicated due to the necessity to because of time lags and possible errors in data transmissions. And when you have one network or one blockchain that processes transactions in 10 minutes, another in 10 seconds, and another in 10 milliseconds, being sure that they're aligned, and that if you have a blockchain, the truth is the same on each one of the blockchains when the transaction is finished, is not a trivial matter. Then there's also issues related to things such as mutual recognition of electronic signatures across networks, or the mutual acceptance of know your customer and anti-money laundering actions. Because if you're in international trade and there's anything with finance involved in the transaction, legally you're going to have to do those what are called KYC and AML checks, but different organizations do them differently and to different degrees of depth. And being sure that the KYC and AML verification on network A is acceptable to network B, that's another issue that needs to be looked at. And there are solutions to this, but most of them are complicated, or they involve trusted third-party solutions, or maybe even paper contracts that are outside of the network electronic transactions. So international trade, if you manage to figure out all of those non-trivial technical issues, there's still another hurdle to overcome, which is legality, especially for transactions. Was it implemented legally on both networks? Is it in line with privacy and other laws? Is it recognized if the originating party, and this can be a issue even on the same network, if the originating party is from another legal jurisdiction than the party with whom they're undertaking a transaction? And there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of people working on the technical issues. But we have to work simultaneously on the legal issues, because otherwise we might end up with some nice technical solutions that no one uses, because companies, they're a little shy of having legal problems with their transactions, especially with their economic transactions. So we've put together for you today 3 lawyers who are going to talk about some of these legal issues. And we're going to start with Luca Castellani, who's a legal officer at the UN Center for International Trade Law, which is commonly referred to as UNCITRAL. And he's a legal officer in the Secretariat. He graduated from the University of Torino, where he received a doctorate degree in comparative law and a master's in international law from New York University after that. He joined UNCITRAL in 2001 and is secretary to their working group on electronic commerce. And he oversaw, very importantly, the model law on electronic transferable records, which is about this issue of recognizing an electronic record if the party who originated the record of the transaction is in a different legal jurisdiction than the one who's receiving or the counterparty in the transaction. And he's also worked on the framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific. So I'll give the floor over to him now. Luca, it's your turn. Luca? I hope Luca is here.
Yes, I'm here and I'm muted.
Okay, good.
And I will try now also to share my screen as I should. And as of course, it did work before. And I do hope that it is also working now. So as it was already said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I do take it that there will be some adjustment of the timing of the meeting. But I do have some 15 minutes for my presentation, and I will be very aware of time limitation. As you said, Virginia, I am here as the Secretary of the Working Group 4 on Electronic Commerce of the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, and especially because I was the Secretary also during the work of that working group in drafting the UNCITRAL on electronic transfer records, which we will call as MLETR, or more effectively as MELITA, which is a very nice name, I think, very appropriate. So the starting point. We know that we are here to discuss the response to the COVID pandemic. But at a more general level, we want to promote digital trade. If we look at the very high level goals, what we actually want to do in support of trade, be it trading goods or trading services, we want to have the information available 24/7 and preferably accessible from any place. And we want to do so because we want to be able to reuse and analyze data. A lot of the things that have been said so far are about data reuse and analysis, especially if we focus on the trade side of the discussion. We know now that global supply chain management relies on data exchange, data generated by the Internet of Things is a reality. Efficiency comes out of these as well as improved services. We have to bear all of that in the back of our mind. As it was said, success in digital trade is the result of three elements: the policy making, the technical infrastructure, but also the legal choices. And I would say that historically, legal choices have not always been at the forefront. We have seen several times where the technical issues were driving policy decisions. but we are now aware, especially in the perspective that was mentioned before, of promoting interoperability. Sometimes I hear discussions about legal and technical interoperability. Well, actually, the legal side, we call it mutual legal recognition and technology neutrality. And these are the two key notions that open the door to interoperability. But when it comes to the legal issues, what traders want to do, as it was said before, they want to have certainty and predictability. And we have to bear in mind, as a lot of the discussion will be about financing, that there are some business fields that are very risk averse. I would say banks are risk averse. I would say lawyers are risk averse. Probably lawyers working for banks are very risk averse. And this is definitely one element that we have to keep in mind. So what's the specific issue that I will be discussing in the next 10 minutes? We all know that there are certain commercial documents that are called transfer of documents and instruments, documents of title, with different names in different languages, reflecting different legal traditions. But here we have one planning element, that is to say, the holder of these commercial documents is entitled to get money or to get goods. The fact itself that there is possession of those documents entitles to payment of money or to delivery of goods. So we're all familiar with these documents. We see them on the slide. We see bills of lading, we see checks, we see bills of exchange, we see promissory notes, and so on and so forth. In many cases, also letters of credit. Important in these documents is that they can be used as a collateral financing. Now that we are into paperless trade facilitation, we also know that these documents contain a lot of information, which is very important and relevant for the commercial transaction itself. The question is, these are documents that historically have been developed around their existence on paper. How can they be used in the electronic form? Ancestral has a 50 years of operations, actually, of which the last 30 at least were spent on preparing enabling texts for various aspects of digital trade. In July 2017, Ancestral prepared this model law on electronic transfer records, which is the answer to the problem that I just mentioned. We don't have the time to get into the legal details of this, but these are the main features. One issue that is very important for this document is to avoid that there would be double spending. That is to say that I can cash in the check twice, that I can present twice the same warehouse receipt, and of course only the first one will get the goods. So this model law has a requirement of singularity of the transfer record, of control, that is to say that the person who may dispose of the transfer record is the one supposed to be able to do so. And of integrity, this is very important because these documents are supposed to circulate a lot, both to circulate in terms of the person entitled to the performance and also to be used as collaterals. From a more legal perspective, and also in the light of the past ancestral texts, we see principles that are very familiar to those who already know ancestral texts in this field. Functional equivalence. This functional equivalence means that we have the same substantive legal regime that applies to both electronic and paper-based documents. Now, for instance, bills of lading issued under English law or New York law. We don't need to change that. We can have to change the business practice. We can continue to do that. Only the fact that we are in electronic form will be under the model, but not anything that has to do with the substance of the law. Model law is technology neutral, although I have to say that it has an explanatory note that gives a very punctual guidance on how to implement it with the distributed ledgers. And especially, I want to say this model law, like all ancestral text, has nothing to do with compliance or regulation. It has to do with enabling, removing the obstacles that law based on the use of paper may pose to the materialization of these documents. That's what it does. Now, from a business perspective, we have to think that whenever we go through digitalization, we have an opportunity to improve efficiency and governance. We have seen here, I have the example of bank payment obligations, for instance, as an example of how there was a demand from business to automate and to make more efficient the verification of the conditions in the letters of credit, electronic form. So this is definitely something that is absolutely needed. It was needed even before the crisis of, because of the pandemic. And we can see here one practical example. For instance, if we have a very robust ecosystem based on the blockchain, then we can say we have a very high level of confidence that the system gives us a certain assurances with respect to the existence of the credit, to who are the parties involved in the transaction, and so on and so forth, and even better check the credit worthiness of the party. So these can be used actually to say this is not only as good as paper, it's better than paper. And so when I use this kind of commercial document for financing, I can actually reduce capital requirements for banks that accept this document. So would make financing altogether less expensive. There are some of these applications, but then we can go to the next level. That is, let's ask ourselves if we can have a completely different perspective on it. As you know now, all the each transaction generates a very high number of commercial and compliance documents. But if we go electronic and if we have all the business partners in a single ecosystem or in a single platform, then we don't need to have these fragmentations in tens and tens and tens of documents. We only need to have this single electronic record and integrate all the data elements in the famous data pipeline. Now, what is the benefit there? Of course, the main benefit there is that we have the best data quality because the information on the record will always be up to date, complete, accurate, and authentic to the best possible way. And this is, of course, the assurance comes from the ecosystem itself. So when we enable the electronic use of these transferable documents or instruments, we also enable the vision for a single ecosystem for logistics, finance, supply chain management, and also for the customs single window. That's why I confidently say that electronic transfer records lie at the core of national trade platforms. When it comes to the COVID-19 issue, what are the benefits of moving into this perspective and adopting the model law? Well, let's start with basic risk reduction. We go paperless. Obviously, we minimize the risks and the delays arising from personal interaction. We heard, for instance, that even the shipment of these courier services were disrupted because of lack of flights, lack of personnel, risk with the packages themselves. All of that is gone, of course. And this is immediate. This is practical. This we can all relate to. But we can also go at a higher level. And we know that if we have full control over the logistics, the supply chain, the customs, then of course we can the delivery of the critical shipment. We can have a fast track for deliveries that are medical, that are humanitarian, and it's easier to manage the whole process through the combination of the platform and, of course, the use of different smart tools in the physical world. And in the even longer term now, we have to look at the economic recovery. The pandemic is contained, we hope it's being contained, but there are economic consequences. Of course, with the scenario that we have just illustrated, with a control over supply chain, both of logistics and financing, we can have more efficient managing of trade finance. And this is particularly important for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises who would have faster and more affordable access to credit. It will be easier for them to use their assets as a collateral. And I have to say, this aspect, I'm very grateful to the International Chamber of Commerce that has launched a worldwide campaign to insist on this aspect, the importance of this aspect, because this is really important, and it is one very concrete, immediate measure that can be taken to support economic recovery. Another aspect that is extremely important is governance for and investigation. We often hear with the documentary credit, trade financing, there are issues with the double, triple use of the same commercial documents to have access to credit. Of course, this is impossible. There's no more the possibility to say, oh, this cargo is on this ship, and at the same time, this cargo is on this other ship, because the cargo containers can be only on one ship. The ship will not only confirm that the container is on board, but will also confirm its position. So there's no more lengthy investigation of possible fraud and of factual circumstances, because the system allows to have all the factual circumstances at a glance. Now, how is it possible to enact this model law? The starting point is UNCITRAL has prepared the 3 hour texts on what we call electronic commerce, which is probably more digital trade in the contemporary language. And these 3 hour texts together have been adopted in about 100 states. Not all of them in all the states, but 100 states have adopted one or more of these 3 texts. So that is the starting point, and that shows that UNCITRAL texts are very effective in enabling digital trade. This model law has already been adopted in Bahrain, and the Central Bank of Bahrain is adopting now a regulation, or has adopted a regulation, to use it for electronic checks for remittances of migrant workers. Singapore has announced that it will adopt this model law in the second half of next year, because we are creating the ecosystem where you have a national trade platform where logistics, trade financing, and customs are merged in a single ecosystem. And there are other countries considering, there are discussions in Europe, as this is the economic Commission for Europe. There are discussions in the Czech Republic, in Slovenia, but also in Germany and in Sweden, and possibly in the Netherlands and the UK. With different lines of interest. There are places like in Germany where, for instance, the maritime code already is compatible with this approach. And so it would be particularly easy to adopt this as a plug-in to exist. As the slides will be shared, you see there the link to text and an explanatory note. And of course, I and my colleagues are very, very happy to assist countries considering the enactment of this model. Now, last but not least, there is an ongoing UN CEFACT project on implementation of MELITA. It's called Transfer of MELITA Compliant Titles. You see on the screen the goals. Basically, this is the transition back. I said in the beginning, technology and legal, well, they are both needed for success in digital trade, and this is the conclusion. Legal is there, and the law can be enacted, and it's quite simple to enact it, actually, because it has already been drafted in a certain way. It's compatible with all legal traditions, with all legal systems. But now we are going back to the technical part, and so I would very much, all who are interested, lawyers, but especially non-lawyers, to join with this UN CEFACT project, to participate in a white paper that will spell out the key considerations for the implementation of this model law. I would like to finish on that note. I thank you very much, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Luca. That was a really interesting presentation. And I'm looking forward over the coming years to see more and more countries implementing this new model legislation, and also to the results from the UN CEFACT project, which I hope will help countries to move forward and to feel more comfortable moving forward with implementing the model law. Our next speaker is Thomas Nägeli, who's an attorney at law and managing partner at Nägeli Rechtsanwälte GmbH, and I have to ask for forgiveness for my pronunciation. I've probably butchered something. But he founded this company in 2015 as an IT law boutique with a strong focus on technology and finance law. And he's also the founder and president of the Crypto Country Association, as well as a founding member of Think Blockchain and Think Blockchain, that's a tongue twister, in Luxembourg. And furthermore, he was a member of the government work group that drafted the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act. And he regularly teaches at several universities. So I'm very interested in hearing about this legislation that the Blockchain Act that he helped to work on, and how it's related to harmonized European financial legislation. Thank you. So I'll turn the floor over to you now, Thomas.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak about the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act and what might be some takeaways for these extraordinary times we are all living in. A proper legal framework supporting new technologies might foster trade, as we already heard, and minimize face-to-face interactions. But what is crucial is that you also have legal certainty for digital transactions. Liechtenstein is a very small country in the heart of Europe. It lies between Switzerland and Austria, and therefore we have a very small market. So cross-border transactions are actually rather the standard than they are the exemption. Interoperability is therefore crucial for us, and I would like to point out a little bit what does that mean for us, and why actually Liechtenstein, as a very small state, developed a legislation in an area which was and actually started with drafting that piece of legislation quite early. And I tried to answer that in my presentation as well. So I would like actually to start my presentation here. I hope you can see that. Okay, so we already heard about me. The key takeaways, I want to start and close with three key takeaways. And first of all, we already heard that it is really necessary that if you draft legislation, that you should do that in a way that it is technologically agnostic or neutral. And Liechtenstein uses the term trusted technology in their Blockchain Act. First of all, the Blockchain Act is actually called Token and Trustworthy Technologies Service Providers Act, and not Blockchain Act, but people refer to it as the Blockchain Act. The second takeaway is token container model, which I will focus most of my 15 minutes on. And what was actually the key idea behind the token container model, that it can use a token based on a, for example, blockchain platform or blockchain protocol to easily transfer digital assets from A to B. And last but not least, what is crucial is legal certainty. We heard that already today as well, and how we tried to solve these questions there. The Liechtenstein regulatory approach, or what, when Liechtenstein started the work group, it was actually, we already had some blockchain projects in Liechtenstein, and it was, most of these projects were actually trying to fundraise with the use of these technologies. Some of you might have heard of the term ICOs or ICOs. And the Liechtenstein government started the work group, first of all, to answer the question if a specific law or if a change in regulation is actually needed or not. In the end, we know the answer now. 1st of January, the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act was set into force, so we now have a dedicated piece of legislation in Liechtenstein. So we ended up with a 58 pages law. There's a full report with a lot of explanations, with a lot of descriptions, and the report is also sharing a lot of thoughts the work group had. All of that is fully downloadable, so you can download that on the website, and the documents will be shared afterwards. It is available in German and in English, so you can have actually the full report is also translated to English as well as the act itself. And that is actually something I started with, that we talk about trusted technologies and not about blockchain, because the work group, when the first question was, what is this all about? Is it just a new technology, how actually parties can interact without intermediaries? And that's actually the core of it. So you have now a technology which enables you to transact with each other without having an intermediary to build trust to that transaction. And so back then, actually, blockchain was just one use case, one answer to that question, one solution, but it was not the only one. DLT, as another term arose, or as a broader technology arose, and we said, so what is actually the sense of it? And the sense of it is that we have a technology which actually can bring trust to transactions without having intermediaries in place. So we are not, or the Blockchain Act itself, the 58 pages act is not talking about blockchain or DLT. Another thing which is quite common, especially in the supervisory practice, is a classification model of token. So they actually classify, okay, this is a security just in a digital way, so a digital financial instrument, for example, or it has just a utility, or it is a currency as a means of payment. The Liechtenstein Blockchain Act is not making use of a classification approach. Not that it's not useful, but in practice, most of the tokens are actually hybrids. As I said, Liechtenstein ended up with defining trusted technologies and understands trusted technologies as a technology which actually enables transactions between parties without having intermediaries in place. Which brings me, and that's already takeaway number one, which brings me to the token container model, which is the takeaway number two. And so what it is all about, the token container model. When you look at, and actually it's the task was to build the bridge between technology and the real world. So to build the bridge between the digital and the real world. So we analyzed the digital world first and said, okay, what's a token? And you don't have to read that. I think it's anyway not readable. But this is just a standard ERC20 token of one of the most used blockchains around, Ethereum. And what you actually do is you define what this token from a technical point of view is able to do. You can limit transactions, you can actually have whitelists in place and whatsoever. So it's very flexible. And it starts and stops with braces. That's why I always use that picture with the two braces. And in the end, you can actually make use of that token, and that's a token container model, that you have a token which is actually just a piece of information on a trusted technology. And if you want to have some asset, if you want to make some asset which is not tradable in a digital way, make that tradable in a digital way, what you actually do, some people call that tokenization. You can actually let the token represent that physical asset. From a legal point of view, it's not the case that you let the token represent the physical asset. What you actually do is you will actually describe a right. So for example, an ownership right or ownership rights or usage rights. And what you actually do is then you let the token represent that right. And what is that good for? If you do that, you can easily transfer the token from party A to party B, as we heard, within milliseconds, seconds, or 10 minutes, but it's rather fast. It's way faster than moving a physical object from Vaduz to Japan, for example. Another problem we had to solve, and this brings me to the question that actually this technology started with the idea of getting rid of all of the intermediaries, and ended up, or Liechtenstein ended up with defining new intermediaries. And why was that the case? The problem is, or the challenge we had is, if you want to have legal certainty, you have to provide that from a legal perspective. That's possible. But in the end, if you then transfer only the digital parts, everybody who has a claim, for example, the ownership, has to get access to the physical object once. And therefore we said, okay, for certain applications, you need an intermediary which actually takes that physical object in custody, or is liable to actually provide you with your ownership right. And this is the token container model, where you actually can have whatever existing right we have in our legal framework, which is rather similar to the German, from the civil law perspective, to the German or the Austrian civil law. So you can have actually a lot of rights you already have in your existing legal framework. You can actually have that represented in a token. And that's a very, very flexible approach. For sure, there are mandatory rights which you cannot actually get around. So there are limitations. But in general, every right you have in your existing framework in Liechtenstein, you can actually have that represented in a token. Which brings me to the takeaway number 3, which is legal certainty. And legal certainty is something we already heard that this technology is developing very, very fast. So you see a lot of actually new ways of interacting, new protocols, new applications. And we said, okay, I mean, if you actually transfer something, and let's say if you have this token and you can easily transfer the token, the problem is that you need to have a claim, you need to have enforceability. Because if I, for example, buy a token on a digital platform representing the ownership right on a physical good, there might be the moment in time where I really need the physical good, and I have to have the claim and the enforceability to get that physical good. So it's not only about the trusted technology. So you need for sure and that's the answer of the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act. It is actually acknowledging that if you transfer a token from A to B, that then the party B, if you follow the rules defined in the trusted technology, B is then the responsible person for the token and actually is the legitimized person to make use of the token. But it's not only about the token, it's also about the represented right. So if you transfer a token from A to B, party B is not only the token holder, party B also owns or is then the responsible person for the represented right. Coming back to our example with the diamond, if I transfer the token from A to B, B also is the owner of that token. And this actually provides you with enforceability, because if you have the ownership right, you can actually, in the real world, you can actually enforce the ownership, and you can actually take custody of the physical asset. So if you want to summarize the 58 pages act on one slide, I will try to do that within my 4 minutes I have left. In the center, there's the definition of a token. We define, or Liechtenstein defines, the token as a piece of information on a TT system, where TT system is trustworthy technologies. So for example, a blockchain or DLT protocol. And this piece of information can represent claims or rights of membership against the person, or actually cannot represent anything. So an empty container, you can have actually an empty container as well. And it is assigned to one or more TT identifiers. You see that we actually invent quite a lot of new terms and define them, but it is necessary to be as technology neutral as possible. TT identifiers in the blockchain world is actually public keys. So, but it has to be as agnostic as somehow possible. We didn't touch ground on the token functions, but in the end, as we said, with every way of representation, a function, as for example, a bearer share had the function of legitimization. So you can actually identify yourself. The liberation function, so the debtor. So for example, if you have a digital security and you claim your dividend, the party, when the company pays you dividend, they don't have to pay twice. We already heard that today as well. And the third part is the transportation function of every token. And this brings me to the relationship model. I already talked about the public key. The corresponding part is the TT key. It's in the blockchain world, it's also known as the private key. So you have the private key, which actually grants you access to tokens attached to a public key. This is, from a technical point of view, not very precise, but it's a way of it's more easy to understand it that way. And what I already said is, what is really crucial is that if you dispose over a token, this also disposes in the disposal over the right. So if you transfer the token, the represented right is also transferred. This actually allows you to tokenize assets. As I said, whatever right you have, you can actually let the token represent that right in general. And as I said, it's a model of representation of rights. The asset has, for example, ownership or usage or whatsoever right, and the token represents that. I didn't touch on the service providers, but there are some crucial service providers, which if you have that token economy in your mind, and that was actually where the Blockchain Act was coming from, that you have an economy using actually new technologies to digitize the whole economy, because that is actually what it is all about. It's not only about blockchain or DLT or whatsoever, it's about digitalization of trade and of your economy. That's why Liechtenstein is also talking about the token economy. And in the end, what is really needed, we heard that as well, companies will not adopt these technologies if they don't have legal certainty. So Liechtenstein amended their civil law, the corporate act, the due diligence laws. We also touched ground there as well, to provide this legal certainty, which is needed for these kind of transactions. Coming back to the key takeaways, trust the technologies. So the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act is not using the term blockchain or DLT. It's broader than that. It might evolve. New technologies might provide solutions in the same area. So that's why Liechtenstein is referring to trusted technologies. The second part is the token container model, where we have actually a token representing an existing right you already have in the Liechtenstein legal system, for example, ownership. And the third point is legal certainty. If you make use of this technology, it has to be enforceable. If you transfer a token, if you transfer the right with the use of that token, you also you have to be able to enforce your rights. Otherwise, it will not actually be adopted. That was it actually from my side. I'm happy to answer questions later, and you will get the slides anyway. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. I thought it was particularly interesting, the discussion on how to develop a law that's technologically neutral, because we have blockchains and DLTs today, but who knows what we'll have in 5 years or 10 years. And also, I think the discussion on enforceability when you are exchanging a right over a physical object, because this is typically an obstacle, first of all, to establish a good link between the right and the physical object, but also how to enforce it if there's bad faith on the part of one party. So that was a very interesting presentation, and I'm sure we'll have some questions when we get to the end.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Volker Krumpel, who's the general counsel and attorney at law at MindSpider. He's a German lawyer, and he's been working as an attorney for over 15 years. And he's worked with law firms, and he's worked for a photovoltaic company. So he's familiar with technology issues, and I guess he decided in 2018 to make the big leap and become the general counsel for MindSpider, a pure technology company, I believe, in 2018, because he realized that blockchain could solve many of the problems that he'd been working on over his 15 years as a lawyer. So I'll turn the floor over to Volker, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. First of all, can everyone hear me? If not, then let me know. I will start now to give a little presentation on my experiences from my work at MindSpider and also from my previous work at an international group. It was Sandra Group, which was stock listed at NASDAQ. And which was doing international transactions quite often. And so also as a compliance officer for this company, I made lots of experience on what kind of implications you have if you have to trust documents, especially PDFs or whatever, which are shown to you in transactions and so. And as I once learned about blockchain and what kind of things you can do with it, I immediately started to understand that this will have great impacts on my day-to-day business, or it can have impacts on that, because it helps, or it can help to solve a lot of problems. And so I want to share some insights, especially from my work with MindSpider, because we at MindSpider established blockchain-based technology to help companies share documents along supply chains. And of course, we have, during the project that we did, we made experiences with standards and interoperability and so on. And in this presentation, I don't want to go too much into the technical and legal details, but more into the expectations of the participants, of the suppliers, of the people who need to use the software, and where can it help, and what are they expecting from this kind of tools. And so I want to show you more about what kind of insights we got and what we learned and what kind of approaches we developed to handle the problems that people have. First of all, to give you a little bit of a background, with MindSpider, we analyzed major supply chains, and in particular more than 1,000 suppliers, in particular in terms of minerals and metals, and from the source of the metal, for example, from a mine, up to the products, to a car, for example, or a mobile phone. With major projects, for example, with Volkswagen and with Google and Cisco and so on. So we had the chance to talk to many people and investigate on how these supply chains work and what kind of types of businesses are involved in these complex supply chains. That means what kind of companies are usually dealing with these minerals and metals, and how they are processed, and what kind of things you do when you produce something and then manufacture something and sell it and give it to the next company who's doing something out of it and sells it to the next one, up to the end customer. And yeah, we saw, for example, we investigated in more detail what kind of suppliers are these. Usually you think that in this international supply chain, there are very big companies and groups and corporations, all these big brands, and of course they are main placeholders in these international trades. But also there are lots of very small companies, like for example, yeah, one-man companies even, who are working in parallel or besides or together with all these bigger ones. And they have sometimes a very different background and a very different day-to-day business, and have to deal with different problems. And what we also focused on was how transparent are these companies? What do they share about, for example, their sustainability? How familiar are they with sharing transparent information, or sharing information and making it transparent? And what kind of information do they hand over along their supply chains? And in particular, what we also investigated is what kind of data are shared along with the materials, and how is this really done, in fact? Where is the handover of the material and of the data? And in our company, we mainly focused on sustainability data and information, because this is at the moment one of the biggest issues, or one of the big issues to see to improve sustainability, because yeah, this is at the moment a big focus, especially of the UN. And we also saw that companies yeah, have to focus on certain sustainability criteria and standards, but which are these? And what are the differences between them in different countries, for example, or in different industries and so on. Yeah, and as I mentioned already, one thing which was very interesting for us to see is how do they collaborate along supply chains. Yeah, this brings us to the next thing. There are many challenges with the standards and interoperability, and one major challenge is that, first of all, supply chains are often very complex. There are various companies with different sizes, as mentioned, backgrounds, professions, and for example, there are companies who have control over several steps in a supply chain. Others are very a small part in the supply chain, but there are hundreds of thousands or millions of them who do the same thing with others, but with very focused activities. And when you see that that this is done worldwide, then you often see that there can't be a one-fits-it-all standard of interoperability, because there are so many jurisdictions and industries and practices and needs involved, so that it's difficult to identify one specific one that is relevant for all. Contrary to that, it's mostly that there are so many different jurisdictions and standards involved, because, for example, when you see Europe, there are standards, and the US and Asian has their own standards. And what is very interesting to see is that many of these standards define things or have a common sense on, or the same sense on certain issues, and deal with it in the same way, but they are formulated a little bit different, or are in different contexts or whatever. So this sometimes bringing another complexity to it, because for example, a small company who doesn't have a special legal department or people who focus on identifying all the differences and gaps, they need to get support on identifying exactly what to do and what is the difference to other practices compared to their own workflows, for example. So yeah, as I said, there's usually no fixed status quo, because all these different laws and standards and practices, they are constantly developing, and they are changing a lot from year to year. because people modify things or adopt to new developments and so on. And this is done on the legal side, but also on the practical side, or sometimes practical things go ahead and then the legal issues follow. And this is what we have to consider when we develop tools to that. They have to be flexible. And also what we have to consider is that there are very varying levels of knowledge and focus. Companies, as I said, because they are so different, not every company has a legal expert in it or a technical expert or a standard expert who can explain things. They just want to do their business and do things quickly and don't want to spend too much time on elaborating or involving lawyers and legal teams or other specialists to explain things to them. This also, I mean, in this workshop, we are also looking on the COVID impact. And to me, I had the impression that many issues that were obvious or that were relevant at the beginning or before COVID were even more important to consider during COVID times. Because what we saw is that, for example, there was a very asynchronous decrease in supplies and demand, and people had to be very quick to adapt to that situation because the COVID hotspots started to affect markets not only locally but domestically and internationally even. So it could happen that you as a supplier had been affected, for example, because a little area in a different country or on a different continent even may affect your personal business immediately because there is the only supplier of a sub-product, of a subcontractor that produces your stuff that you need. And so not knowing who's in your supply chain and the missing knowledge of alternatives of supplies was a big issue, or is still a big issue. This is not only when it comes to when you're looking for supplies and then you see, okay, one supplier is not available anymore or can't supply anymore, and now you need the next one. Where do you find him? What kind of knowledge do you have about this supply chain? And this is not only relevant when it comes to your suppliers who suddenly stop supplying, but also if you want to start ramping up again to get back to the usual business. So this brings us to lots of uncertainty, which requires lots of communication between the different participants in the supply chain. And yeah, how it is done, how can this be done easier during COVID-19 times, but also in general. This is something that we try to solve and help with our company and developed our tools in that direction. Yeah, and especially with regard to sustainability, we saw that many people now start to even focus more on sustainable supply chains, but others also do not, because they say, yeah, we have now different problems. We need to really start to ramp up everything as quick as possible. And now sustainability is not the biggest focus of our activities, whereas others said now it's even more important because otherwise we have the next issue sooner or later again. Okay, so the key learnings from our insights into these big supply chains were that there are very different participants, and you have to understand where these come from and their expectations. There are also very different life cycles of materials and products. So for example, if you investigate a supply chain, it can be that minerals are sourced on continents and countries far away from you, but sooner or later things may end up in recycling loops. So it can be that, yeah, most of your supplies of your minerals, for example, that are in your products come from local recycling facilities and so on. And this has lots of advantages. If you consider how you can get control or a better understanding of your supplies, if you better understand what is coming from which recycling loops and what can end up in which recycling loops. Also, one big thing which is very important to consider, is that you have to keep things simple, because most people, I mean, if they hear about blockchain or high technology, this is interesting for them, but they can't focus on the technical details. Usually they don't have the time for that. They just want to use software or use tools and immediately start using them without thinking about all the technical implications or the legal implications or the implications how to implement it. And this is always a thing that you have to keep in mind when we think about the interoperability. It has to be useful and simple. So from our end, we usually start with the low-hanging fruits because this is what people are, if you go step by step and start with the easiest things to manage, then this brings people into the technology, and then you go from there. Once they have certain learnings and experience, they can develop further on. And also, it's important to adopt to the given workflows, because usually companies don't want to change everything from one day to another. They just want to start or want to stay to their workflows because they are used to it, and adopt certain things if they help them in their given workflows. This also requires some flexibility because you have to, not every workflow is the same, and these different companies and this different industry who work with different standards, there are often very different workflows, and you have to see how you get into it. And we learned already that APIs are very helpful to help people to get into workflows, into their given workflows, because there's already lots of data available, which you don't have to establish twice, but make use of what is already there. Also, what's an important thing is that there is so much information available, but people need to be able to digest it, and they need to get guidance on that. Because if you don't know what you want to get out of your data, and if you don't know ways to digest all the information, then it becomes very difficult to find a solution which is good for you as a supplier in a supply chain. So, and we at MindSpider developed something that tries to help people within their supply chain. It's something that is based on blockchain. And what we did is, first of all, we established an open protocol. We call it the MindSpider protocol. And this is something which is constructed in a very flexible way, because we saw, as we mentioned already, people have very different workflows, very different data they work with, and they need to have a basis and something that helps them to operate with their given data and instruments. And what we did is that we tried to provide, if you want to share data along the supply chain, one big issue is that some things you want to make transparent to everyone in the supply chain, but other things you want to just keep private and only show to your immediate buyer or your immediate supplier. And we try to balance these different interests by allowing people to have different, let's say, call it boxes, like where you have something where you put in data that can be seen by everyone in the supply chain if he can confirm that he is in this supply chain, and other data that is just only for certain companies or certain participants in the supply chain. As always, with this blockchain technology, one major opportunity that it brings is that it's is immutable data that you can provide. So this is what people usually understand immediately. If you can't modify a PDF anymore, this can help to minimize risk and forgery and fraud and corruption and so on. And this is, for example, the major thing why I still think that for many industries this is really the most important thing, because at the moment when people communicate with PDF and see that there's lots of data involved, which I can't see if it has been Photoshop, for example, or otherwise modified, then this is a big issue. Also, our technology allows to share easy information along supply chains by reducing NDA efforts and DD efforts, and with this also reducing costs and so on. But also, and this is one thing that you have to share with the people and bring them to understand, or make them to understand, is that in the end, people have to see the advantage of why they should use the software. And the major advantage in this case is that you can modify your supply chains or work with them and give them incentives by using the blockchain technology. Once you understand better where things are missing or where data is missing, then you can easily help to incentivize people with blockchain technology, because it allows you to address people that you didn't know before, that you might not know by name, but you know that they are in the supply chain.
Volker?
Yeah. So this.
I don't know if you saw my chat, but you've run over, and we need to end because we're already over.
Yeah, it's fine. This is anyway the last page. So what I wanted to say is that in the end, what you and CEFACT can do, and what they are already doing, is that they can examine these different approaches, identify best practices, and also take an active role, join governance systems, and facilitate what they are already doing by supporting technologies and helping them and bring in transparency into it. So yeah, thank you again. And this is what I wanted to mention. And I'm waiting for your questions later. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're having overall sort of a problem with the time. We're running a bit behind. I've been asked to cut the question and answer short. This has helped a bit because I've only seen one question actually, and it's a question for Tomas. So we'll give him maybe 3 or 4 minutes to answer this, and then we'll have to end the session. And if you have questions, you can send them into the Secretariat, and they'll communicate them to the speakers. The question for Tomas is, as we embrace digital technologies, what are the measures in place, be they legal or otherwise, to deter the development of digital monopolies and to prevent discrimination against SMEs and other small players? Thank you.
I think that's one thing or one topic where you have to have rather a general approach. So I don't know if it is different if you use digital technologies or digital assets. I think you have to solve the same problem. And what we did is actually we tried to analyze the whole legal framework with the object to find the areas where we have to amend the existing legal framework because the use of digital technologies change something where we have to amend. And the only thing what I can tell you is that based on the report and based on my knowledge, that was not an area where we identified actually the desperate need for amendments in the existing legal framework. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just the status we have now.
Okay. So, if I understood correctly, you looked at what are the areas where new legislation is needed, and you felt that the existing legislation covered the issues related to competition and monopolies.
Actually, yes, that was. Thank you very much for rephrasing that, because we tried to do that in every area, and so we didn't identify the need to amend there, which doesn't mean that it couldn't improve in that area.
Okay, thank you very much for a short and concise answer that was very useful. As I mentioned, if you have additional questions, please send them to the Secretariat, and they will forward them to our speakers, because I think we had better turn the floor back to Maria Rosaria and the next panel. Thank you very much to all of you for listening.
Thank you very much, Virginia. As usual, excellent moderation. And thank you very much to Luca, Thomas, and Volker. Sorry if we are cutting a bit your quick Q&A, but we are running late, as Virginia said. So with this, I will start the second session that actually I am moderating. So the second session is going to be on online digital platform. So the development and functioning of global digital platform as enablers and facilitators of social and economic interactions is a prevailing form of operation and communication in today's new reality. Digital platforms and networks are becoming even more important as they enhance trust, transparency, traceability, and security of flow of data, materials, goods, and services. Convergent technologies enable efficient real-time functioning of this platform through the visibility and accessibility of data. And the development of this new platform and the better exploitation of existing platform addresses the increased need for safe and continuous flow of goods, services, and information while protecting and participating participants in the value chain. So a variety of digital platforms and data are needed to facilitate certain parts or entire processes through the value chain. And this is why, as CEFACT, we have been looking at this. And the most well-known one is, of course, blockchain. In CEFACT, we have been preparing several white papers on this. And I'm very happy to introduce now the first speaker, Nena Dukutsov. Nena is the head of project group for new economy and blockchain technology at the Ministry of Economic Development and Technology in Slovenia, where she is leading the preparation of the action plan for blockchain technology. That is a strategy for Slovenia on implementation and implementation framework, with the purpose to identify really relevant areas for blockchain and to define a regulatory framework and the step necessary to the development of the new regulation for blockchain. Nena is also representing Slovenia at the European Blockchain Partnership, and she's a member of the OECD Blockchain Expert Policy Advisor. And in CEFACT, in addition of being the head of delegation for Slovenia, she's also our vice chair for this group, the advisory group on advanced technologies. And she's also the project leader of the CEFACT chain project that she will present to us today. So with this, I give you the floor, Nuna.
Yes, Maria, thank you very much for this very nice introduction. I'm also very happy to participate at today's conference, even more because I think that we have to put very much attention to COVID and the outbreak which happened 3 months ago, but it seems that it's coming back, and presenting a solution on blockchain is even more important, what we will see also in the next panel when we have presenting use cases. Can we go to the first slide, please? Okay. So if I start, I have 2 points today. First, maybe a few words about the preparation of our report on COVID, because it is very much connected with our CEFACT chain project and from the point of view of interoperability and standards and platforms and digital products that we can develop through this. It is also a facility to support also the organizational processes during this the COVID-19 and after COVID measures. So if I touch first our report, we pointed out three main points. And if you go to the second slide, and maybe we can come to the first later. The second slide is telling us about 3 points that we were focusing. We faced challenging situation in 3 issues. There were limited trade flows, and as the solution recommended for limited trade flows, there were digital platforms that were enabling or that can enable to enhance supply chain logistics exchange information and to support the business continuity and innovation. This is very important because digital platforms can help us in cross-border trade, in cross-border relations, and if we have interoperable blockchain platforms, then they can be a very useful tool for implementing and continuing that trade and logistics. Then what we faced within this report was limited staff capacities because there were a lot of operations on the ports, on entering points of the countries that were impossible to be handled because a lot of documentation and a lot of workload was pushed into them. So with the digital products, we found it or we recommended the solution how to handle this issue of limited staff capacities at the borders and entry points. Then we faced also the challenge with limited information exchange. Information exchange has changed rapidly, you know, because there were some kind of it was a great shift from physical to digital information exchange, and here we found out that standards and interoperability can be forced, and that we can enhance the multilateral engagement in cross-border interoperable ecosystem when creating, reviewing, and adopting standards and policy frameworks for international trade and logistics. We found out that we had completely redefined supply chains from physical to digital. We faced the global supply chains redefinition because it moved from global to local ones. On the local level, it shifted from for example, from conventional industries to 3D printing and masks production. And here, with the track and trace technologies, we also helped to solve certain problems and certain challenges. We also had an issue for organizational innovations, and the main focus was to enhance the usage of global digital platforms, which also global or interoperable cross-border blockchain infrastructure means. On the other hand, maybe to go one slide further. Next slide, Thomas. Yeah. At the same time, on the European level, we are developing European blockchain services infrastructure. This will also be interoperable infrastructure, and it will function through the national nodes that will be set in EU countries. Here we are in the process of building standards. It is very helpful what I had in the first slide, that UN CEFACT developed that white paper of technical applications of blockchain to UN CEFACT deliverables. And it is very helpful to develop standards around semantics, around core component library that you have at UN CEFACT, and also it is that architecture reference model for mapping UN CEFACT semantic standards. It is also very helpful in building that interoperable blockchain infrastructures, and also in that multilateral understanding and a mutual recognition of all the issues that we have raised on that interoperable infrastructure. So this was all motivation for us to build the project, to introduce the project, which is UN CEFACT chain. This is globally interoperable infrastructure, which we tried to shape in this way, that is taking into consideration of existing standards, of architecture reference models, of process modeling for smart contracts to test and implement use cases, and blockchain application data needs. So this white paper is based on 3 dimensions, on 3 points of analysis. First one is legal interoperability. The second one is governance interoperability, and the third one is technical interoperability. And now we have the group of 45 people. I think this is a huge project group in which we have UNC standard experts and other experts that are high quality experts and very much contributing to development of this project. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Here is the structure of the project, of the white paper that is defining the base for UN CEFACT chain. So as I said, we are analyzing that interoperability through 3 different elements, 3 different dimensions of interoperability, but all the 3 are then analyzed through multi-DLT interoperability, DLT systems, or single DLT interoperability, and also consensus interoperability. And we came or we started to research what are the challenges and what can be solutions within each type of interoperability. Then we decided to include quantum key distribution, as it will be an issue, maybe not now, but with the data evolving and continuing of the accumulation of data, it will become more and more relevant for blockchain and how to deal with the data through quantum key distribution. And the fifth issue is use cases. As I will explain later, we are analyzing 3 groups of use cases, and each group of use cases are analyzed through 3 dimensions of interoperability. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. We divided the group according to those three types of interoperability and quantum key distribution and working and use cases. We divided the work into 5 working groups. The first working group is dealing with the legal interoperability. where we find the few specific topics, or we divided that legal interoperability and analyzed it through different points. Okay, the first is applicable laws. We know that we have a sort of 3 types of applicable laws here, and one is according to ITU recommendations and technical report also. The first group is the group that directly addresses software code, and it is very related to IPR of software codes, methods of communication laws, and so on. Then we have the second group of laws that addresses governance. Governance of DLT systems. This is recognition on DLT governance, conflict laws, competition laws, antitrust laws. And this is maybe also the answer to the previous panel with through that type of laws, also the competition and the antitrust actions can be analyzed, and also interoperability can be linked to that type of governance of DLT systems laws. And as the third one, we have laws that affect some of use cases of DLT. This can be, for example, crypto or consumer protection or AML types of laws. And when we choose, when we have same activity that can be subject to multiple laws, then as it is in supply chain, for example, then we have solution, or either choose a law or to put arbitration clauses into used solution. Okay, when we go to governance interoperability, we analyze governance interoperability through data, through policies. Here are relevant data privacy, trusted identity, infrastructure security, law enhancement mechanisms, and compliance monitoring. Then we tried to define commercial governance models. We know that we have permissioned and permissionless governance models. We tried to define commercial models. We mostly focused on cooperatives, because they can comply with the blockchain logic, also with consensus mechanism, also with that social value proposition that blockchain technology brings to our society and the economy as well. And through that, we also analyze on-chain and off-chain solution. This is how the data is transferred, distributed, and stored on the on-chain or off-chain. If we go to the to the next slide, please. The group of technical interoperability is dealing with the strict technical interoperability, and this is analyzed through also through on-chain and off-chain solutions, applicable laws, data standardization, fundamental principles of interoperable data sharing, containerization, and consensus mechanisms. For the fourth group, this is quite interesting chapter. Quantum key distribution is analyzed through quantum computing impact on cryptography, then on quantum resistant cryptography and post quantum algorithms. And what is the very interesting part is impact on quantum computing on blockchain, together with its possible implementation on DLT, benefits on quantum encryption in DLT, interoperability, and so on. Then it is also focused in transnational quantum resilient communication, which will be the issue in the future development, also on data economy and also in blockchain technology. If we go to the next slide, please. Okay, then the fifth working group is focusing on three types of use cases, three groups of use cases, which are analyzed through three dimensions of interoperability. We have, for example, energy efficiency use case group. We have two use cases that are analyzed through three types of interoperability, and those are analyzed through challenges. We identified the challenges for every use case, and also we are proposing certain solutions that can be applied for a specific type of use case. Then we have a value chain or supply chain use case group. We have here three use cases, and also there are very interesting, for example, Volker was explaining about MindSpider use case, but we have also here analyzed MindSpider raw material sector tracing, and also from all the three dimensions of interoperability, and also two use cases within digital identity use case group. They will be summarized in a type to show what are the challenges and the solutions, and after that will be more and in-depth stressed within the groups of each parts of interoperability. So maybe just to finish here, not to be too long, we can go to the next slide. We have next week on the 9th of July a workshop where the project will be represented in detail, so that you can find how we structure the white paper, what are the solutions, where can we find the solutions on legal, governance, and technical interoperability, and how can we start to use or to design design the path to examine or experiment that interoperability in the real world. So our conference is or workshop is called Towards Global Interoperable Blockchain Infrastructure, and you are all invited to participate on the conference. I would like to thank you here. I would finish, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nana, for taking us in this journey across the UN CEFACT chain project. And as you said, everybody is invited to participate in the workshop that will be held on the 9 July. The information are on our website, where you will also find information for this event. And now I will present the second speaker. It's my pleasure to invite Emmanuel Gan, that is our colleagues that we frequently exchange information and speak at each event. Emmanuel is Senior Analyst in the Economic Research and Statistics Division of the World Trade Organization, where she leads the WTO work on blockchain. She's also the author of a recent published book entitled Can Blockchain Revolutionize International Trade? As I said, she's regularly speaking in blockchain events, Manuel also leads the WTO work on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and she has been, of course, very busy in this COVID period, supporting MSMEs. In her previous position at WTO, she was counselor to the Director General, Pascal Lamy, and also in the accession division, she was assessing trade policies for governments wishing to join the WTO and advising them on how to improve their business environment. And please, Emmanuel, with this, I will pass you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this introduction. Let me upload my slides. You can see them?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay, brilliant. Great. So thank you very much for this introduction. Delighted to be here. I've been asked to give an overview of blockchain and DLT platforms that have emerged over the past few years, and there are quite a few, in the trade area and in trade finance, and to explain what are the benefits of these platforms and also the challenges that emerge. So that will be the focus of my presentation today. Now, very briefly about the key features, key benefits of blockchain. I'm sure many of you are really familiar with that. But one of the reasons why we've seen so many platforms in the trade area emerge over the past few years is that trade is still very paper intensive. It involves many different actors, and I'm sure many of you have heard about this famous example of the container being moved from Mombasa to the port of Rotterdam, with more than 20 agencies involved and 100 people. So coordination is complicated when it comes to international trade. And the unique features that blockchain offers in terms of peer-to-peer interaction, exchange of information in real time in a highly secure environment, the possibility to transfer assets, the fact that the records are time-stamped, and the fact that you can use smart contracts to automate transactions has made this technology very appealing for many actors in the trade area. Because it allows for greater transparency, it allows to build trust, to have traceability along the supply chain. I recently conducted a survey with Dipesh Patel of Trade Finance Global, with actors in the trade and trade finance area to get a better sense of why they feel that blockchain and DLT is interesting. And we approach the different companies that are involved in the platforms that I will show very soon on the screen. And the top 5 benefits that we mentioned were first transparency between all the parties, gains in speed and efficiency, real-time overview of transaction, cost reduction, and reduced counterparty risks. So these are really the benefits that actors in the field, that companies involved in these blockchain platforms see in terms of the benefits that this technology can bring. So as I said, we did a mapping of the different platforms that exist in trade. There were so many being developed that at some point I thought it would be good to try and have a better sense of what the landscape was. This periodic table was published at the end of last year, but I must say that it's such a fast-changing environment that we actually need to update it. So we're working on an update because it has been overtaken by event to a certain extent. But it can give you an idea of the complexity of the landscape out there. So there are many different platforms that have emerged over the past few years in relation to trade. And here we tried to list the key ones in relation to trade finance and to a certain extent supply chain finance, even though there are so many out there that it's impossible to list them, but also insurance and all the ones related to supply chain digitalization of trade documents and platforms in the transportation and logistics sector. So first, trade finance. There are many platforms that have emerged over the past few years. Why? Because there are multiple challenges with trade finance. And trade finance is a key component of international trade. 80 to 90% of international trade is financed by some form of financing. But what are the key problems? I already mentioned that trade is labor, paper intensive. And here you have a graph that is taken from a BCG study that shows you the number of actors involved, the number of documents, and all the interactions between them. So there are many inefficiencies due to the fact that many of these processes are still paper-based. Many risks, therefore, that result. And as you can see here, for a letter of credit transaction, there are risks basically at each stage of the process in terms of human error, fraud risk, manual procedures, risk of delays, additional costs, delays. So a lot could be done to try and remove these inefficiencies and improve trade finance processes. This is what blockchain can actually allow. You have on the left-hand side what a traditional model is for a letter of credit transaction. And blockchain allows the different actors to interact directly on a peer-to-peer basis, as I said. So it can remove many inefficiencies from the system, from the whole process. Now, a second problem with trade finance is the fact that regulatory compliance requirements increase trade finance costs. And here, this is a survey that was conducted that shows these key regulatory compliance requirements. AML KYC, that Virginia mentioned a bit earlier, comes as the top one. Here, again, blockchain can provide some interesting solutions to improve, for example, the credit history, or allow companies to build a credit history. And you mentioned, Maria, SMEs. One of the big problems with SMEs is that very often they find it very difficult to signal their fitness to be financed because they have no credit history. And I'll mention a few initiatives that have been taken in that respect, that use blockchain to allow SMEs to build that credit history and then facilitate KYC compliance checks. And a third challenge when it comes to trade finance is the famous trade finance gap that the COVID crisis has made even more complicated and is likely to increase even more. It has been estimated at 1.5 trillion over the past few years, has remained constant and mainly affects SMEs. But as I said, the current crisis is likely to make this number grow even more. So it's no surprise that a number of platforms have emerged when it comes to finance, and I've taken here just the ones that are either the most advanced or the most well-known. But if you go back to the overall periodic table, you will see that there are more out there. You have different types of trade finance platforms. You have those that tackle or that relate to open accounts, like we.trade, which is a European-based platform that focuses on SMEs. You have Comgo, that is based in Geneva and deals with commodity trade. Marco Polo, Financial Trade Connect. You have others that work on letters of credit. Contour, which used to be called Voltron, but was incorporated into Contour earlier this year. So actually in our study, you see it as Voltron or letter of credit network. And Comgo, so Comgo, you can see, has developed different products for letters of credit, but also open account. And same thing with Financial Trade Connect. So different platforms out there that try to leverage the key features of DLT to try and improve trade finance processes. Then there's an array of initiatives taken in the supply chain finance area. Many out there, many in Asia actually. So it's almost impossible to have a comprehensive overview of what's out there. But we flagged a few that we thought were interesting in our study. And I just want to mention one here, HaloTrade, that has a very specific focus because it aims to tackle the sustainability angle of trade finance. It's a startup that focused on delivering sustainable supply chain financing. So I thought it was interesting to flag it there, but there are many different initiatives out there. And there are some marketplaces that have emerged. So the ones that I mentioned until now are more consortia, except HaloTrade, which is a startup. But the other ones that I mentioned, like Marco Polo, Voltron, bring a number of banks together, we.trade. to try and streamline trade finance processes. Then you have some startups like HelloTrade or ComGo. But the common feature of these platforms is that they look at the process of trade finance. In addition to these type of platforms, you have in the trade finance field platforms that have emerged that are more like marketplaces. The objective of these platforms is to connect the different actors so that they find clients, but also they use the technology from a traceability point of view. So for example, the one that I mentioned here, Fast Track Trade, allows SMEs to build a credit history, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. So blockchain is not used so much to streamline trade finance processes, but more to allow companies to build a credit history and then connect them with other actors. Another area where blockchain is being investigated very dynamically is transportation and logistics. I'm sure many of you have heard of the platform called TradeLens. There's also GSBN, the Global Shipping Business Network, that is not as advanced as TradeLens, but is also in the same plays in the same arena as TradeLens. So what's the objective of these platforms? It's basically here again to connect the different actors on a single platform to try and remove inefficiencies and frictions. And you can see here, this is a document from TradeLens that shows you the different actors involved, the different documents involved, and the reason why they built that platform to allow real-time exchanges and direct exchanges between the different actors. The benefits that they claim result from these platforms is real-time visibility, improved customer service, reduced paperwork, and improve risk assessment. It improves the utilization of assets in terms of identifying and proactively managing unexpected events. Also, it proves useful to obtain access to greater depth of real-time information and increase access to single source information. In addition to those platforms in the trade finance and transportation or logistics field, you also have a number of initiatives that have been taken to digitalize trade documentation. These initiatives, and if you look at the website of Wave, they will say they're a blockchain platform. But here again, it depends on how you define a platform. They're not a platform in the sense of TradeLens or the big trade finance consortia that I mentioned that bring together multiple actors along the supply chain. No, but they are initiatives that leverage blockchain or DLT to try and digitalize trade documentation, and through that remove frictions along the supply chain. So I've mentioned several of these projects here. VACT, Wave, CargoX, Ecom, SDocs, they're all looking at blockchain to digitalize the bill of lading. You also have some initiatives that look at blockchain for certificates of origin. So I've mentioned one here, which is Camel One, Vicargo Cloud, which is based in Singapore, and was one of the first ones to look into the potential of blockchain for certificates of origin. Now, blockchain is also being looked into at the level of customs, and I wanted to flag here one specific application which relates to mutual recognition of authorized economic operators. There's a project in Latin America. There are actually several projects in that area, but Cadena was the first big project in that area to try and use blockchain to address some of the challenges that come with the question of authorized economic operators and their mutual recognition. The fact that processes are manual and that information that is being shared is sensitive can be a problem. The difficulty to establish the provenance, traceability of the data, the inability to grant AU benefits in real time, inability to react in real time when a suspension occurs. So here again, this is one area where there's some work being done and some platforms being built using blockchain to try and address the challenges that blockchain that authorized economic operators mutual recognition agreements present. So I have something that appeared on my computer, and so it blocks my slides. Okay, yeah. So when it comes to COVID-19, I mean, we've seen that I mean, the COVID-19 crisis actually revealed inefficiencies of supply chains and has exposed inefficiencies in terms of sourcing materials and critical supplies such as ventilators and personal protective equipments. And so has underscored the need of businesses and governments to improve the integrity and provenance of pharmaceutical products and other products such as food, for example. There have been many counterfeit scandals, and this is where blockchain has been mentioned as an interesting technology that could be used to address these challenges, because it allows for greater transparency and traceability along the supply chain. What we've seen as well is the emergence of some platforms, connecting platforms or marketplaces to ease supply chain disruptions. And I wanted to mention two platforms here that were developed as a result of the COVID-19 crisis: the IBM Rapid Supplier Connect, which aims at connecting the different the suppliers of ventilators or protective masks with those who need them, I mean, hospitals and health organizations, because we had a number of new organizations, changing their production and producing masks or other equipment needed in the case of the COVID-19, but hospitals or health organizations did not necessarily know about them. Another project out there is Timless, which is a tech startup that has partnered with the Dutch government. So it's a technology consortium to map and analyze the supply chain. And so it's a sort of decentralized marketplace to facilitate the distribution of medical supplies in the case of COVID-19. So these are, in a way, just in a few words, the different types of platforms that have emerged in the trade finance field, and some of them that have emerged as a result of COVID. But as a number of speakers have mentioned, there are also a number of issues that need to be addressed. And I won't spend too long on that, because some of them have been developed quite extensively in previous presentations. So interoperability, at the technical level, we talked about the importance of semantics, data models, processes. Virginia mentioned these three levels of interoperability in a brilliant way at the beginning of this session. The question of regulatory issues, we had the first panel on that with an interesting presentation on the MLETR. One thing when it comes to trade that is critical beyond the MLETR is also the model law on e-signature, that is also a UNCTRAL model law. And only 30+ states have actually transposed it into the national legislation. Now, you can have a great technology to digitalize trade transactions, but if your legislation does not recognize its signatures, it will do very little to actually remove frictions from international trade. So putting in place this regulatory framework is critical, and some speakers have mentioned that as well. Now, regulatory challenges, that was also touched upon. The question of legal recognition of blockchain transactions, smart contracts, etc., that need to be addressed if we really want this technology to make a difference. And the last point on which I wanted to touch upon was the question of the governance of platforms. So not only do we have different platforms, sort of digital islands that need to talk to each other, that's a critical issue, but there's also the question of scalability. So of course, interoperability and the legal regulatory framework are critical to allow scalability of these platforms. But what we've seen also with these platforms is that some of them have been more successful than others. And well, I can't go back to my slide with the periodic table, but if you go back to it, you will see that we tried to assess the level of maturity of the different platforms that have emerged. And we estimated at 2.3 on a scale of 5, which means between the pilot phase and the entering into operation. And most of it actually comes to the question of the governance of the platform. These big consortia, these big platforms can be interesting to remove friction, but they're also quite heavy in terms of governance. So this is also an issue to be addressed. And I know that I've spoken already for quite a long time. So I just here, there was just to recap the technical legal challenges, but these are, yes, the points that I wanted to flag. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. And the presentation, even the one of Volker that apparently was not showed on the screen, will be available on our website. So you will be able to look at them even, with a bit more time. And thank you, Manuel, also to recall the recommendation 14, UN CEFACT recommendation 14 on authentication of trade document, where the e-signature is also addressed. So with this, I would like to introduce our last speaker of this session, that is Yoshiharu Akane. He is Senior Manager of the Blockchain team in the Business Strategy Department of Entity Data Corporation, where for the last 4 years, he has been leading the promotion of international trade data sharing platform that is a cross-industry platform system using distributed ledger technology. In entity data, he has also been part of the team development leveraging internet technology for multimedia communications and content distribution. Yoshiharu has many years of experience in developing and providing highly reliable backbone solution. And with this, I would like to pass you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, everyone. Speak to you today. My name is Yoshiharu Akane. I am in charge of blockchain technology in entity data in Japan. Today, I would like to talk about our blockchain-based trade platform. Firstly, I would like to explain our activities in blockchain technology. In 2015, entity data started blockchain practices in both Italy and Japan. After that, the blockchain activities increased and launched Blockchain Career Center of Excellence. Now we have around 300 members from 24 countries in this area. In blockchain industry, we are highly evaluated by several research companies. As you can see, based on report from entity data is positioned as one of the leading companies in blockchain. Another research company, Everest Group, also recognized entity data as a leading company in blockchain services. One of the achievements of our COE activities in this trade work is this trade works. As you may know, trade procedures still have lots of paperwork and involve many stakeholders, such as shippers, forwarders, shipping companies, banks, or insurance companies. TradeWorks is a digital platform powered by blockchain technology. It facilitates such cross-industry transactions by providing a one-stop platform for every user. TradeWorks transforms international businesses from a defragment company-specific procedures to standardized seamless cross-border transactions. Here, I show the history of our consortium activities. In 2017, we established a cross-industry consortium in Japan. This consortium includes banks, insurance companies, trading companies, and shipping companies. we discussed issues in trading business procedures in both legal and technical perspectives. We learned from past experiences that consortium focusing on one specific industry does not work. Since international trade is conducted by players from various industries, they must be involved in a consortium to facilitate digital trade. Those players from various industries have been discussing their business challenges and explore how to overcome their challenges by introducing the trade platform. Finally, this year, we decided to launch a new platform called TradeWatch, operated by a new company called TradeWatch Incorporated. The goal of TradeWatch is to create an ideal digital trade platform. First, we gathered players from various industries. Second, we provide a wide range of documents in the form of structured data instead of PDF. Third, we utilize the accumulated data in the platform to create a new business ecosystem. Now I explain benefits of trade digitalization. Here I wrote 4 benefits, but I explained the first 2 benefits in particular. In the COVID-19 pandemic, it is much more important to handle trade documents electronically because paper-based manual handling needs physical signing on the paper, sending and receiving documents by courier. By removing this manual handling, we can reduce cost and increase operational efficiency. In addition to this, we can prevent illegal acts. This shows the result of the test run of TradeWatch 2 years ago. TradeWatch can reduce date entry by reusing the input data in the previous transactions and replace manual checking of documents with system checking. The test run conducted in Japan 2 years ago confirmed that TradeWatch can reduce cost by more than 60%. And these benefits are available to all trade-related players. The other benefit of trade digitalization is contributing to illegal act prevention. For example, a paper transaction could become illegal sometimes intentionally, such as double financing, or it could involve much loans from multiple banks using the same application. We conducted a proof of concept in Thailand, and it shows that the use of TradeWatch could prevent double financing. The POC in Thailand was a great success and attracted a lot of attention at the ASEAN Business Investment Summit 2019. From business and technology perspective, we think there are 3 requirements for digital trade platform. First, it must have interoperability and connectivity with other platforms. In particular, UN CEFACT is important, and TradeWatch comply with UN CEFACT. Second, it must include small and medium-sized companies as well as large enterprises. Third, each country should be able to operate its own business independently and ensure the fairness of data management. I will explain them one by one. This is an activity how we try to increase the interoperability. TradeWatch is working closely with the International Chamber of Commerce and Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority, and we conducted a signing ceremony highlighting the importance of cross-platform interoperability. in a side event at the World Economic Forum 2020. SMEs or SMBs are also important. Trade platforms should facilitate not only big enterprises, but also SMEs' trade procedures. We prepared APIs for large business to connect their ERP systems and create an ecosystem of digital international trade. As SMEs have limited budget size and resources, we provide third-party vendor services or direct access to TradeWorks using a simple user interface. This is the third requirement. Trade platform should enable independent business operation for every country. TradeWorks realize independent business operation, which satisfy each country's market needs by sharing information using blockchain technology. It also ensures fair data management because data ownership is not restricted to specific players. There are many trade platforms. Actually, each platform has different architecture to share data. Before blockchain, traditionally, almost every system has a centralized model, which server and database are located in one area. Now, in blockchain era, many platforms have emerged, and basically they are categorized as pure P2P. In pure P2P model, big company or institution own nodes and sharing information among platforms. However, our service, TradeWorks, is categorized as hybrid centralized P2P model. In this model, we are combining advantages of centralized model and pure P2P model. Each country has only one blockchain node. I explained the same concept with a different slide because this is very important feature of TradeWorks. When you hear blockchain node deployment, what do you think the node is anyway? Put it simply, node is a foundation in blockchain where blocks of data are stored. The important characteristics of blockchain technology is that the information shared among stakeholders are guaranteed to be original through mutual verification scheme. Entity data suggests that this characteristics is most effective in cross-country transactions. So we recommended one node per one country architecture. When node is held by only a few companies, there are some points we need to consider. One is the cost for blockchain product updates, which occur frequently. And sometimes we need to make decisions to change if better blockchain product is released. All companies who own nodes needs to take care of these costs and risks. Second, the company who own nodes can use the data which is recorded on blockchain. But how about the company who decided not own the node? They can't use data, and that makes information gap between who has node and not. The benefits of our architecture is reducing the risk and the maintenance cost of participating companies, and also by defining the rule of data management in each country. All participants can utilize the accumulated data for big data business, statistical analysis, and so on. As you reference, there are issues and problems in blockchain technology. Data explosion, irreversibility, channel explosion, and transaction explosion. For example, with blockchain technology, past information cannot be deleted. So data capacity continues to expand, and it occurs data explosion. TradeWorld's hybrid architecture tries to solve these technical problems. In this slide, I will explain the details of TradeWorld's architecture. Entity data links the blockchain with distributed databases. Trade documents are stored in the distributed database and only shared among the nodes of the countries involved in the transaction. By only sharing the hash value of the documents with all countries' nodes, it is possible to verify that the trade document has not been falsified. This concept can prevent data leakage to countries not related to the transaction. In addition, each country only needs to manage the related data so that they can make system investment according to their capacity. Small country has small node, and big country has big node. And because data is stored in the distributed database, not in blockchain, we can erase the data and comply with one of the GDPR requirements. We think that is also benefit of our architecture. The last part is a legal aspect. Making everything digital sounds easy. And yes, it is easy for only development. However, they legal supported is exchanging digital documents and used to finalize trade transactions, even permissioned by law? And the answer is no. We can guarantee electronic document originality technically, but not legally. Now, however, we see that the trend is gradually approaching to realize that MLETR, the model law on electronic transferable records, for example, supports the use of electronic bill of lading in international trade. Another effort in Europe, such as EIDAS, is providing electronic signature scheme to provide that the source of trade documents are from trusted and certified stakeholders. We believe these kind of efforts are essential to realize the 100% digitalization of trade business. That's why we need to start thinking how to introduce such similar efforts in Japan, ASEAN region, and others. This is the roadmap of TradeWorks. We will start commercial service soon this year. Then connect our services to Japan National Single Window. Then we will connect our platform to overseas countries counterparts, such as ASEAN RDTC, Regional Digital Trade Connectivity, achieve 100% paperless international trade. For your attention. For more detailed information, please visit the following website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a very good presentation. Thank you for this journey. We have two questions. I think that Emmanuel is replying to the second question in the chat because we unfortunately have not so much time. I have a question for Nana. I don't know if you, Nana, can reply really on very quickly. The question is, to what extent is the blockchain work looking into interoperability with the federative networks of platforms that the EU is investing heavily in through a number of funded projects like Phoenix and Federated? We really have half a minute, not even. Sorry.
Thank you for the question. I can answer this, and I checked the web page of this project, and it's very interesting. So we can contact beneficiaries, the implementing partners, and if we get some interest to get involved in the common development of the project or the common development of certain standards, we will be very happy to do this. As I see in the stage of development of the project is they are planning 220 pilots, living labs, scoping report, and so on, and 221 interim testing pilots. So we can maybe interfere or start to cooperate in this phase. If you provide some contacts or somebody that we can contact in the now in the near future, please do this. I know that Jako Vorspuri was setting the question, so if you can contact me so that we can start to cooperate. I think that we can develop a lot of the things together, as you are planning that federated platform API for different federated platforms, and blockchain can be very useful tool for supporting this also for interoperability of those federated platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nena, and thank you to my three speakers, Nena, Emmanuel, and Yoshinaru, for your very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. And with this, I quickly pass the floor to Stefano. Stefano Quintarelli, our chair, will moderate the third session on digital products. So Stefano, I pass the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to all the speakers for their excellent presentations, very interesting. We are running very late, so without any further ado, I will hand over for the first session in the first speaker in session 3, digital products. I will hand the word to Peter Verhagen. And Peter, if you can briefly introduce yourself so we make sure that we don't lose any time. Thank you.
Yes, I'll share my screen. Let me see if it works, and then I'll present. I'll introduce myself in the presentation. Let's see if it works. Oh, it's again with the. Yeah, you're seeing my presenter view, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, yeah, but one second. I need to switch.
Yeah, this is the two screens syndrome. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think this is better. Thank you very much for having me here, for inviting us. I would like to talk a bit about verifiable credentials in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are using them for what we call controlled reopening of society and economy. And let's see, my next slide. It seems unresponsive. Oh, here we go. I work for TNO, and TNO is the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research. We are an independent research and technology company, one of the larger in Europe. We have about 4,000 staff working on a variety of innovations. I think the innovations that are concerned here are related to our ICT and transport and logistics units. We focus a lot on the technology that I will tell you about. It's called self-sovereign identity, and I've inserted a link here where you can find more information if you want to read later. A little bit about me. My name is Peter. I am focusing on decentralized technologies for data sharing at TNO. I lead our team on self-sovereign identity, and I've been involved in setting up many innovation ecosystems around blockchain, about self-sovereign identity, and also other technologies like multi-party computation. I'll be a bit quicker than usual, because I'm on a very tight deadline, given that we are running out of time a bit. So I'll be very fast. If you have more questions, here's my email address. You can always email me, and I'll take a bit more time to answer them. I'll rush a bit. Sorry for that. We go to the next slide. I think let's start by saying what are verifiable credentials. I think I'm not sure if you can see the the screen because there's a little thing on top. Do you see the
yeah, yes, we do.
Yes,
okay, we do.
What is self-sovereign identity? What is a verifiable credential? Think about it in the not digital world. When you get a diploma from university, the university issues you a piece of paper with a lot of stamps on it, and nice writing saying that you've earned a degree. They say that you are now capable of doing having a certain degree. You are then the holder. You are in control of this document, and you can show it to anyone. You can show it if you apply for a job, which is meant for, but you could also show it to your parents to prove and to make them happy. Meaning you're self-sovereign in who you present these documents. The stamps on the document, your parents or your employer, they could check the stamps and check the document to see if you've really been awarded such a degree. That's in the non-digital world. If we go into the digital world, what we see is that such mechanisms are lacking. We don't have this trust. So if I have some information and I present it to somebody else, and this is information coming from a issuer, it's very hard to prove that this information is indeed correct and still correct, and has not been changed in the meantime or has not been revoked. Self-sovereign identity is a technology that allows to create this form of digital trust, so that I can prove information from somebody else about me, showing that it's really true and correct. And I have some issues with here we go. I've made a very, very oversimplified architecture of what is SSI, and we'll start here. What I already explained, there's an issuer, somebody sharing a credential, in this case my degree, into my wallet, which is an app on my smartphone typically. And then there's a verifier, my employer, who wants to see if this credential is true. At all these steps, people are connected to a networking layer that is often blockchain, but not always. It doesn't need to be blockchain. It can be also other technologies for decentralized networking or even centralized storage. And here a verifier can check that the issuer hasn't yet revoked the credentials and that they are still intact during the transport process. We're talking about credentials. So typically a layer higher, we say, well, what is a credential? What kind of information is written in a credential? In a diploma, it's written, what is the degree? What is the university? What is my name? Does it really connect to me? And then there's also some business logic. A university has some business logic when they give me a diploma. I need to have certain grades for certain courses. There's also business logic for a verifier, for an employer. They say, well, we accept these and these universities. They're acceptable. Students from that university we'd like to have on board. Students from a university we've never heard of, we don't know. We might need to do another bit of vetting. This technology is now becoming well standardized. I've written down a couple of standardization bodies. If you're interested, you can take a deeper look. So Hyperledger, Indy, and Aries are more the blockchain related verifiable credentials. At the bottom part, W3C verifiable credentials, where you can read all about credentials. And then trust over IP is quite new, and I think it's an interesting way where they also talk about governance of this technology, and not just technology. And then in 4 different layers, roughly similar to what you're seeing here. Back in March, we were approached to join the International COVID-19 Credentials Initiative called CCI. You can find it at covidcreds.com. And it's a volunteer effort of more than 300 people from 100 organizations, such as us, but many different organizations that are all working to use this technology basically in the fight against COVID-19. The goal of CCI is to explore and learn how we can use these verifiable credentials to reopen society in a controlled way. So we say you can lower the health risks if you can digitally prove information around COVID-19 about individuals. And the most logical one is, can you prove your health status? Can you, for instance, prove that you have been tested? In the future, if there will be a vaccine developed, we don't know. There's not enough medical evidence yet that you can even develop a vaccine. But if there is, can you then prove that you have been vaccinated? There's pilots where people prove that they self-declare that it didn't have a fever, and then use that as a proof. But also, for instance, in Spain, people are asked to prove that they are essential workers, and only then are they allowed into certain public spaces. And you can make a digital proof of your employer saying that you are an essential worker. This is all good and well, but we need to do this while safeguarding privacy and human rights. And I'll go back into that at the end of the presentation. I think it's very important. And this technology, like many, can also have a bit of a dark side. I'm also going to tell you, there's many what we call sister projects. So in many countries around the world, people are working with this technology on COVID-19 credentials. And CCI is also aiming at sharing knowledge between all those local projects. Some of the topics for CCI are, for instance, what should be in a COVID-19 credential, and what should be written in a credential that shows that you've been tested, either positive or negative. What should be in a credential where you self-declare that you have gone through a couple of steps to do self-assessment of your health. And also, how can we know that a test result is coming from a government certified lab and not from a fake lab, for instance? So how can we have this assurance that those credentials are coming from the right organizations? And then there's also, we need to have countermeasures against coercion. So I think these are sensitive. This is health data, which is, at least in Europe, it's very privacy sensitive. We should have measures built in that prevent anyone from using these credentials, and maybe also from extorting people to share those credentials. Like I said, we support sister projects. We also make templates for how to organize such a project and what are the things you should look at, and to make it a bit faster. Developing tools and also doing communications to make it. I think the question that I also had, well, what does this have to do with trade? I think trade is brought by people. So we see now that there are, for instance, 150,000 seafarers were trapped at sea because no port was willing to take them in. There were people stranded in cruise ships. There were empty airports. There were also a lot of different regulations. And if you dive in a bit deeper, you see at the bottom, you see that there are, this is a nice graph from the New York Times where you see people's risk, people at risk from COVID infection. Obviously, this batch is people working in health. But you also see some jobs related to travel, to transport, to logistics. I think ship captains somewhere below here. These are typical jobs where it's hard to keep social distancing, where you are crammed together in a tight space for a long time, especially in passenger travel, less so in cargo. But what we see, there certainly are reasons why trade is stopping, is also because we are really cannot have a good risk limitation measures to limit the risk that people will spread the virus within companies, between countries. And what you also see is that national policies are constantly changing, and also local policies. So policies of cities, policies of companies, they keep forever changing, and it's very hard to keep track of that. And for instance, we in Europe, Austria, for instance, if you wanted to enter Austria, you needed to have a I'll just press approve. If you wanted to travel into Austria, you needed to prove that you had been tested negative, I think, for less than a week ago in a COVID-19 test by a government-approved laboratory. And it was hard to get those kind of tests. I'll go to the next one. This is an example of a sister project. It's some project that we are also involved in. It's called Unlock, with, of course, the NL standing for the Netherlands. It was focused on healthcare, so we used SSI technology where healthcare workers were tested for COVID-19. On their smartphones, they can receive the digital version of the test results, and when they enter a healthcare facility, they could scan their phones, or they could prove digitally that they were allowed in and that they comply to the testing policy at that site. I think what's important is this line here. You can also check from home if you're compliant. I think that was something we incorporated also to make it more privacy secure. From the safety of your home, you can see if you comply to policies of a place where you are that you want to enter. You see a lot of organizations involved here at the bottom, similar to CCI. We see in these kind of projects that we have many different stakeholders involved. Universities, this is a health and safety organization, but also legal. For instance, CMS is a law firm, because there's a lot of legal things you need to keep in mind here, especially around privacy and GDPR. You have a view of the app that we created, and here it's about to share a test result to a healthcare facility. We've used these in a proof of concept stage. We have not yet shared any real personal information because there's still a lot of discussions going on about the legal aspects, ethical aspects. It's quite a complex field. And just to give you a few of the challenges with this technology, in this case for COVID-19. We see that GDPR or data protection is very case specific and country specific. For instance, we at TNO, we have our own testing laboratories where we do COVID-19 virus research. And there are legal, it's legally possible to have that people are actually obliged to be tested. It's common practice if you work in a hazardous laboratory. It's very much not common practice if you're an accountant. And so it's very different for the law, it's very different. It all has to do with the relation between employers and employees, that there's no coercion. You're not forced to share any medical information. But there's also a lot about ethics. Privacy. In Europe, I think on the GDPR, you can say privacy is almost now legal, but it's still also an ethical thing, also especially in countries with little data protection regulations. But also about exclusion. Will the use of this technology lead to people not being allowed into certain public spaces? Can you only be allowed in if you've been able to afford a certain medical test in countries where there's no public healthcare payment system, and where it's only then maybe only rich people can participate in society and not the poor? What is the effect on behavior? If you have been tested, will you then behave differently? And also, it's not foolproof. You can test someone one day. There's also not all tests are fully, they're never 100% accurate. And what is the value of such test result 5 days later? Also, we're using emerging standards here. They are now coming to the point where we can start building actual real-world systems on it, but it's still immature. Medically, there's still limited evidence of, for instance, immunity. I think immunity is the hardest part here. That I think is we should not use this technology in the. Some people talk about immunity passports. I've given a nice read, a critical read here by Elizabeth Ramirez on Medium. You can find it. It gives all the downsides to this kind of technology for this use. And also standardization. For instance, what we see is there's little global standardization on digital health certificates. And then last but not least, governance. How do you organize such a system with many different layers, different organizations involved? Sorry for being so fast, but I really am on a tight schedule, so I'm just rushing. I think yes. I would like to have two things that I think are important that we are at this point lacking. And it's actually not just related to COVID-19, I think it's beyond. What we're learning is that there is actually very little global standardization, how you can really prove health claims, international, for travel and for trade. For instance, I have a yellow fever vaccination that is required to enter certain countries. It's very hard to prove that digitally. It's still a manual process and it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's also very easy to manipulate. So I think this is not just something for COVID-19. That's also why we are interested in this from a research perspective. This is much broader applicable, and especially more, it has less of the negatives that I mentioned before for diseases that we understand better. And also, I think it can also go beyond health, because SSI, basically, it's very good at proving that certain digital signatures belong to somebody, that certain claims are true, and you can easily see a future where you use that also to, for instance, signing of digital documents. I think it's, but also the question, are there other digital credentials that are very useful for trade? I can come up with a few. but also how to standardize global data models that they also work with verifiable credentials. You need to make, I think you need to upgrade sort of the traditional way of standardization. You need to upgrade it to make it truly machine readable, and also that the context of what you mean is stored somewhere. Also, typically we try to also store that on a blockchain. So if we say the word, if we prove something about a test result, for instance, can we give the proper semantics? What kind of test has been used, and is it in the Netherlands the same as in Belgium and the same as in Australia? But you can have these. I think these are generic questions that you often have, especially in international trade. So this was my most rushed presentation ever. I'd like to thank you for your. I'm very sorry. I feel a bit bad that I need to rush so much, but it's just.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
It's
if you want
no,
more
it's
information,
very...
I've put a little bit more links here. It will also be shared online, and if you need more information, you can always reach out to me.
Thank you
for the quick bombardment that I.
Thank you, Peter. Just 1 second. I know that you are in a rush, but 20 seconds to answer one question from Dalia Kondova. If you see a feasibility of an interlinkage between SSI and the digital signatures.
Yes, there's a huge link, and the link I think is called DID, decentralized identifiers. I would like to point this person to the standardization on decentralized identifiers, or DITCOM, PeerDit. Those kind of standards are, I think, very much useful in that area as an addition to. Yeah, and if you want more information, let's get in touch. I can give.
No, if you can send an email to us with some pointers, perhaps we can add it to the report of the event.
Yes, I will. I will ask for. I will send you a little bit on relation to. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. It indeed opens a lot of issues, because here we are in the middle of a debate between utilitarianism and ethics. It's very complicated issues. Thank you very much.
They're indeed very much complicated, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so next speaker, I leave the floor to next speaker is Mario Bortola, CIO of Tolar Hashnet. He's an IT leader with more than 20 years of experience in the telecom industry, innovation, R&D, and international business development in challenging environments. He has worked on new startup projects, including Blockchain Hub, as an advisor and connector to ICT relevant business plans and projects. Okay, he has been IT director of T-Mobile in Croatia and board member of Combis, which is the largest ICT provider in Croatia. Mario, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, Stefano. It's very pleasure to meet you. And also it was a pleasure to hear all the presentations before, especially Peter's. So do you see my presentation? Can you see it?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm Chief Technical Information Officer, company Hashnet, creator of next generation distributed ledger technology, where we aim to solve the challenges of blockchain technology today, like scalability, speed, interoperability, and energy consumption. Since our offices are in Croatia and Slovenia, and you know all that the impact of COVID-19 in both of the countries is huge, since we rely to visitors coming every year, and tourism is a core part of country's revenues. We started working on C90 Pass project, but also to show the power of blockchain and right tools that we can create and use to solve many challenges that we are facing today. And basically, we heard a lot of challenges today about the disruption of social and business processes caused by COVID-19, and also lack of digital tools that can speed up the process and provide required security and privacy levels. So complex system interoperability between involved parties is one of the topics that I think everybody who was having a presentation announced. And what we are trying to do here is to see how we can gap this bridge and how we can somehow provide a better solution. On the other side, because of all of the mentioned challenges, there is no secure method for a person to prove in real time that they tested negative for COVID-19. And these results need to enforce quarantine without a long-term solution from the current situation. So there is a great need, as also Peter mentioned, for a smart solution to allow economy to open again. But it's not only about COVID-19 disruption, it's all the ones that might follow later. And for sure, we need to be ready somehow for the situations that will occur in the future. So we envisioned COVID-19 Pass, blockchain-based digital solution. It's a digital pass valid for 14 days, available on your mobile phone, stored in a public distributed ledger provided by Hashnet. This digital pass certifies that holder tested negative to the virus. He is free to commute and visit all the certified venues. However, it can also be certification of vaccination against COVID-19 or something similar, which can come up in the future. Holders of certificates are venues where all the employees and suppliers are constantly tested for COVID-19 and have also certification valid for 14 days, but it can be bigger or smaller amount of time. It's configurable on the system. They're also able to scan COVID-19 pass owners and receive data whether pass owner has valid certificate using mobile app and QR code. Components of our solution is the digital pass, of course, valid for 14 days, presented through mobile app and QR code, and no sensitive data is stored on the mobile application, only QR code representation of address in public blockchain network. A pass owner is someone who wants to visit certified venues and got his certification from credential providers. And the venues are businesses, government services, like hotels, airlines, airports, border control, restaurants. Anyone actually who would like to receive customers that are certified negative or received vaccination or whatever is that we are configured to do. Credential providers are the bodies such as licensed public and private testing centers doing the COVID-19 testing and KYC, know your customer procedure, on the pass owners and have been given certification from national health centers or government. And database on these credential providers is constantly updated with location-based data, price of the test, and availability to provide our pass owners with up-to-date information where they can go for certification. They're also using the mobile app, but the different one from pass owners for KYC and issuing of certificates. Access to the network is given after local government or national health centers have them licensed. And the medium is a smartphone app with QR code and scanner at the venues, of course. So how does the process work? We start the process by downloading a mobile app that shows us where is the nearest certification point that we can use for testing and receiving the app. And after the app is downloaded, we are automatically dedicated the wallet with unique address and forwarded to certification center best suited for us. Of course, price of the test is to be paid by the user of the pass. When we get tested, our result will be stored in the wallet, still keeping all the information about us private since it is secured and cryptographically signed. This part is really important, and I think this is the main advantage of our C19 pass. Well, everybody who has the access to the network can check some particular address. Only certified venues can connect this address to the person that is the owner. So we selected this anonymized approach to create the privacy while keeping interoperability very simple and easy to use. National health centers and local governments are the ones responsible to give the certificate testing sites and are the ones who are keeping the list relevant and updated for a particular country or area. These sites are the only ones who can give somebody pass and nobody else. They're doing so by transferring tokens to the C19 pass holders, address that expire in 14 days, after which pass holder is required to do another testing. Of course, this parameter can be configured, as I said before, and extended or lowered And if environment needs it, in case of emergency, whole process can be stopped. This is achieved through a multi-layered distributed ledger approach, where we create each ledger for purpose of one function, but all of them are interconnected together for the whole project. Next thing in our process is when person having our pass, C19 pass, comes to the certified venue, whether it's a hotel, airport, sports venue, as we discussed before, and presents QR code from his application that will be scanned and verified by staff at the venue. Other means of identification can be offered here, like place of birth or document ID, which can make sure that holder of the pass is the person that was verified. After the verification of the valid pass, person can enter the facility. All this process is quick and efficient without any additional hassle. All the scanned passports, COVID-19 passports, and person scanning are entered into distributed ledger to keep track for possible future queries. This information is stored in the different ledger, where only certified institutions have the right to access and have possibility to extract the information that is available, and data is segmented per region. So basically, you can have interconnection between the ledgers and the regions, but you cannot use the information if you don't have the access to it. The access is definitely allowed by smart contract rules, and who has the rules and who has the opportunity to access the information can. And how is all that possible? So you're using advanced blockchain network hashnet to provide immutable context for the saved data, which means that nobody can modify the data after it is written to the distributed ledger. Also, only holders with digital certificate can give somebody validity of digital pass, and we record, of course, every transaction transparently on the ledger. To enable such a mechanism, we use smart contracts, ensuring their roles and access to the system are transparent, safe, and secure. However, everything also needs to happen quickly, since there will be many events going on in parallel at every venue, at every COVID-19 test site that gives certificate, and it has to be executed without any delay. This is where the hashnet comes to the rescue. So what we call it is transactional superhighway, since it can process more than 100,000 transactions per second. It also works very efficiently, unlike popular public blockchain networks today that everybody is using, since they're using proof of work algorithm and require mining and a lot of processing power. Hashnet is based on proof of stake consensus algorithm and uses significantly lower amounts of energy. It also uses masternodes that ensure integrity of the network. We envision that government agencies or national health centers or any other agencies will be ones having masternodes to provide transparency and security of the distributed network, and that this new model can really simplify and speed up secure data exchange between the international entities. And one more important thing is the time of finality of the transactions, which is much better than in traditional networks, since recording takes place as soon as transaction is executed. As we heard in the presentations before, if whether it's a 10-second or 5-second or milliseconds time, we have very big opportunity here, since the transaction is recorded as soon as it happens. We don't have to wait like 10 seconds to transaction to be executed. And we have also built hashnet to be interoperable, since we are using Solidity, the same programming language as in Ethereum network, and we are using the same tools available to build smart contracts and interact with the network, like Web3j and Web3js. So we can easily migrate legacy network applications to hashnet, giving developers opportunity to use faster network without any much additional knowledge required. So we have covered digital products. Why is it important, and in short, how it works. Also the technical aspects of hashnet that is running the application. However, one very important question remains, of course, and this is security, and the other is privacy. How will such product provide maximum security, but also keep in mind all the privacy aspects like GDPR? The answer is that if we have a simple digital product, easy to use, it always needs to have complex mechanism to handle both security and privacy. For example, data tampering. We use blockchain network for encryption and validation. Everything that occurs on the blockchain is encrypted, and it's possible to prove the data has not been altered. Because of its distributed nature, you can check the signatures and on all the nodes on the network and verify that they haven't been changed. On the data security, the keystone is access control for sure. And we use smart contracts to provide access to the data on need-to-know basis, creating layers of permission to data access. And on network security, we're using layered distributed ledgers connected together. First layer is public ledger, where any person can open an account under a unique address, but this layer is open to public without any personal information stored into it. I would say that for such a project to work, only way to go is to secure data in distributed storage where there is no central storage system. And as for the privacy, respecting the privacy of data and transactions is a core tenet of this project. A key aspect of privacy in blockchains is the use of private and public keys. Blockchain systems use asymmetric cryptography to secure transactions between users. And in these systems, each user has a public and private key. Public keys can be shared with other users in network because they give away no personal data. Our public network, available to everybody that can download C19 Pass and the application, does not store any personal information or user data whatsoever. For example, if there is a loss in access to the wallet and to the application, there is no recovery since no personal data is stored in the mobile application or the public network. And to finish with a brief summary of our digital product. So C19 Pass is a universal product that can be used for many different applications, not just for COVID-19. And it keeps in mind biggest topics for individuals like security, privacy, and ease of use. Our innovative approach, using layered interconnected distributed ledgers, is giving simple interoperability, and the power of blockchain, it's keeping data immutable and secure. And core platform on top of which everything is running on is HashNet, next generation blockchain platform, solving challenges presented in most common blockchain solutions available on the market, like scalability, speed, interoperability, and energy consumption. We have shown here that there is a bright future for blockchain applications, especially projects like this, where we need distributed secure networks and easy interoperability between different parties. And to be short, that is it for me. Thank you much for your time. And you see my details here. If you have any questions, I will be very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, Mario. No, but somehow WebEx was not helping me. Okay. No, thank you, Mario. I just wanted to ask a question that I wanted to ask also to Peter, but he had to leave. I don't know if you have seen the movie Gattaca. Gattaca is a movie whereby people are screened with their full genome sequencing, and then based on the probability of how they would become in the future, they are favored or disfavored with respect to certain positions, to certain roles, etc. So effectively dividing the society in castes, you know. And there is always a moment where they tie the identity of the person to the tests, and that they do through through blood samples, so that they are able to tie the specific person to the genetic profile. Now, this is much reduced thing, but how do you think it is possible to tie the real identity of the person to the result of the certification? Because I could send my brother to do the certification and then present the credential as mine. So in sometimes along the process, there needs to be a point where the identity of the person and the result of the verification are reconciled. And there, in my view, some privacy issues arise. I'd like you, if you can comment on this.
Sure. That's a really good question. So I hope that this what you mentioned in the movie won't happen. But what we envision is basically that KYC, who is doing the Know Your Customer procedure, will be the certification center. So when you come there, with your application, they will scan your ID or your passport, and they will bound your address with your details that you put in, but these details won't be shared in the public network. I mean, this is most important thing. So basically, if you look at the public network, even now, if you look at the, I don't know, Bitcoin, or if you look at Ethereum, there is a anonymous privacy there until you bound some address with some person, for sure. And what we aim to do is here, the innovative approach of the solution is that we have one network, which is a public one, where we just have the addresses with the results of the tests, and everybody can get to this network and see the result. On the other hand, the other network, which is connected with the test centers and the government, has the details on you, and we use this as some sort of a pyramidal approach where you can have as much details about the person if you have a bigger clearance on that. For sure that for general public it is anonymized, but for some sort of deep dive from some government, you can see they can see the details on the customer. So to answer your question shortly, the KYC is done on the test centers and on the centers that are doing the certification. And on the venues, they can check this using, for example, the document ID or the date of birth or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mario. We are very short on time, and we are overdue, really. So if there are other questions, I would like the audience to write directly to Mario Voboda, and I thank you very much for your speech. Then, so let's speed up things, and I hand over the floor to Jaroslav Ponder, who is the head of the ITU Office for Europe, International Telecommunication Union, representing ITU in Europe and directing actions, projects, and initiative and expert groups targeting 45 countries of the region. Well, okay, the floor is yours, Jaroslav.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And at the beginning, I have to apologize you all for being very executive and very brief on the presentation. Unfortunately, we started already some meeting where I was supposed to be already 20 minutes ago, and I will need to leave in like 8-10 minutes. Bear with me, sorry for that. Ladies and gentlemen, first question, do you see my slides?
No,
not yet.
So let me share them. Work now. Well,
they're coming.
Are they? Super. That's, are we there?
It's telling that it's coming, but we still don't see it.
Super. Now
yes,
we are there.
Here it is.
There it is. Okay, super. Thank you very much. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, as rightly our colleagues introduced, we have the pleasure of doing some concrete work in the 46 countries of the Europe region. And of course, COVID has caused a big rush and big emotions for the old telco. Everybody moved to the digital solutions, which of course rely on the connectivity. And this is some core business of the ITU, which we are doing. But apart from this, we are doing a lot of standardization work, a lot of policy advice, and a lot of assistance to the countries in putting in place concrete solutions for the development. So of course, we are privileged in Europe to be well connected. And of course, we are also one of the nation which is very much mobile biased, and we don't face those challenges which are in the other regions. But of course, in terms of the COVID, apart from the implications for the industry, and there is a lot of other implications where more dedication, more attention is needed. And one of those issues relates to the mobile health, where everybody currently is taking a look, how can we rely on the mobile health solution, but the mobile health solutions with the international understanding of use of these solutions cross-border, in the cross-border way. That's why at the beginning of the COVID, we have established the Global Network Resiliency platform to evaluate the impact of the COVID, where different stakeholders identified different type of the impact expected, but there is no doubt that the technology sector and the government are the most challenged, expected to deliver reliable solutions which are relying on the digital identity with secure and secure interoperable systems in place. So of course, there are a lot of different implications with the raised increase of the use of the internet by several hundred% in the use of the teleconferencing, but also all applications. There was increase of the demand for the different apps. The governments and the others were expected to provide different solutions. And there is a lot of push in terms of digitization of those traditional services like payments, like e-health services and others to be done now online. Of course, doing all this, we need to rely on the international standards. That's why the ITU is happy already to provide certain international standardized solutions for digital identity, but also for the blockchain and the other technologies, which have instrumental impact on the development of the payment system, on the mHealth, on the e-government systems. Of course, in this context, also during the COVID, there is ongoing discussion on the tracing apps, which could have the different type of the architecture, centralized or decentralized. There is ongoing discussion on the introduction of certain solutions with the embedded solutions in the operating systems. And all this is great. Many countries are launching already the applications, which millions are downloading. In India, Arogoya Setu, the application has been downloaded 116 million times by the citizens to trace. Singapore Trace Together had almost 1.5 million, and many European countries also, after launching, noticed a huge downloads of those applications. But of course, there are two principal questions related to this. How much those applications are interoperable once we are starting to travel. Currently, we are happy being at home and being interoperable at the country level. But what happens once the lockdown is over and we are going out? Of course, for the developing countries, the other challenge is what to do once we are relying only on the 2G, second generation of the networks. But this is not that much of relevant to the European market. That's why for us, immediately 1 month prior to the COVID breakout, we are happy to launch the new platform on the called mHealth Hub, which is the joint partnership of the ITU, WHO, and the Andalusia ministry, co-funded by the European Commission, which literally provides the unique opportunity for all European mHealth application producers to get together. We have 22 institutions with us, which are actively active in the mobile health applications development. And the main focus on this is to take a look at at this situation, how to boost the development of the mHealth solutions, providing mHealth assessment frameworks across Europe to compare them and to embed all these mHealth solutions into the health systems, thanks to which also the citizens could benefit from those. As I said, we are mainly focusing on the Western European countries, and the origins of the project are coming to the 2018 when we took a look at the different frameworks which were existing in Europe, and to assess the mobile applications developed and to check if they are compliant with all parameters expected from the application to be trustful and to be recognized by the government. And what we concluded is that not many of them, most of framework did not assess all the criteria. What led to the good initiative to this project, to be able to take a look at the assessment frameworks, and in particular, and to take a look at the transparency, safety, reliability, validity, and interoperability of all applications. So, of course, this wins extremely high importance in the times of the COVID, when in the after lockdown situation, we'll start to use those applications across the borders, and we'll rely on them and not being forced to download each time new application in any territory which we would be entering. So for the time being, we have identified 13 health app repositories across Europe as the basis for the further assessment, and the work together with the hub partners is going on, and to arrive to the conclusions and to arrive to the next steps of the implementation, to create the catalog of assessment frameworks and repositories in Europe, and to equip also all those in the brief technical notes on the gaps and common assessment components with the recommendations, to make sure that we are a little bit harmonizing the approaches across the Europe. Of course, this is something which wins on the strategic importance, that we are engaging as many countries as possible. And that's why there is the open call for also other countries to engage in this exercise, to address the issues of the security, privacy, architecture, data integrity, governance, and needs solutions matching. Currently, we have concluded the first phase of collecting different applications available across Europe, and the call is open. So you'll see also in the repository over 50 different applications currently available. Most of them, unfortunately, focusing only on the country-specific needs, but the challenge is how to ensure that all of them, they can be credible against the government, and that the government can build upon and those integrating them in the health systems in line with the recommendations of the EC and the European Commission systems. This brings us, of course, to the issue of the identity, which is a key issue for all those solutions, which in the ITU was strengthened through the work on the financial inclusion. And of course, the trade is something and the commerce is very much linked to the financial inclusion. I will not go into the details on this work, but basically our motivation of this work was related to the financial inclusion gap existing across all countries, where almost 1 billion people were unbanked and without any digital access to the financial solutions. They cannot be also the part of the micro trading and the bigger transactions. So this led us to the projects which concluded in the several activities, but most important, the development of series of the technical standards, including those related to the digital identity, which currently are in use by the stakeholders working around those topics. So dear ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, I'm very sorry for being so the executive way. I'm remaining at your disposal and available via the email, and also willing to put you in contact with series of our experts working on the daily basis on all these issues. And we are looking forward to the great collaboration in the future with you on these aspects. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaroslav. And yes, we have run extremely late. So if there are questions, I would ask the audience to write directly to the speakers, please. I thank you, all of you, for having been with us this afternoon. Jaroslav, you have brought us some issues very interesting. I will go to the hub and to take a look at what's in there. Indeed, identity and trust have come over and over again during this afternoon, and they are key. Using technologies to support identity verification and trust building are key to facilitate recovery from this COVID situation. The life cycle of data is also one of the things that has been recurrent. The capture, creation, acquisition of data, the storage, the integrity, how we use it, how we exchange it, the interoperability, how we protect the data, and then in order to be compliant with law, how we can destruct the data or archive it. So it has been a very interesting workshop. Too long, unfortunately, I must say, but it was because it is very interesting, and it's always hard to be online for so many hours in a row. I thank you very much for everybody for being here. I thank Elizabeth and Sue and all the moderators of the various panels. I thank you, the staff, for organizing the event. After the event, our group will circulate the report and the report I mentioned, and the one that we made after starting the poll on the group of experts on disruption brought by COVID. And we will circulate the report, and we will circulate as well information about future activities and how you can join the group if you have not done so already. All materials will be available online. And then thank you again for the participation. It's been a very productive session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano, and thank you to the last three speakers that I'm sorry if they were a bit rushed. All the questions were addressed during the session or in private, so they were put in contact with the interested speakers. So I really thank you all. All the material for this conference will be online, including the recording of the session. So the 9th, there will be the workshop on blockchain if someone is interested. And I hope to see you soon in some way. Thank you very much to all.